What's up, guys? It is Modern Craftsman Monday.
Monday.
I don't know how to follow that.
Oh, you go first then. I'll follow you up. Monday.
How's it going, guys? This week we have Ed Earl, the Zen Builder.
You may not have heard of him. Like I didn't. I had to look him up before the podcast. But phenomenal.
Yeah, really interesting conversation. Again, doesn't go the way any of us thought it would. A couple rabbit holes, but talking about really, he saw a Zen master and got a life coach, and what, in my eyes, usually someone would leave construction, chose to stay in construction and find a better life for himself.
Yeah, so if you listen to the podcast, you'll basically be a Zen master yourself, and your whole life will go according to plan, and you won't have any stress.
We talk about how you take things personal.
Personally, that's an adverb.
And if you should or shouldn't.
Mm-hmm.
And big announcement, we've actually partnered with Duration Moulding and Millwork for a year, guys. So they'll be hanging out with us for the next 52 episodes or so. They're manufactured exclusively from Boral True Exterior Trim. Duration Moulding and Millwork products combine the benefits of wood, PVC, and cement-based options without the drawbacks and nagging issues associated with each of those materials. If you're already familiar with Boral True Exterior trim boards or siding, then you know how polyash performs. Duration builds on Boral's polyash offerings and essentially delivers whatever you'd like to have in a polyash profile that aren't standardly available from Boral themselves, like standard moldings and beveled sidings, semi-custom moldings, sidings, or completely custom molding sidings and millwork to fill a specific need or match existing conditions. With Duration, it's all about fast and efficient installation, high performance, architectural accuracy, and long-lasting beauty. Try Duration on your next project and, in air quotes, make your neighbors jealous. For more information, please visit their website, durationmillwork.com.
Speaking of which, what glue do you guys use when you're gluing?
You have to use a polyurethane glue.
Polyurethane?
So it's either Gorilla or PL.
Like PL polyurethane, the thick stuff.
Yeah, like the gross stuff.
Okay.
So we typically use Gorilla.
Yeah.
Same.
Which that's like the stuff that like foams when you use it.
Yeah, let it foam and then scrape it off before you paint.
Just be smart about with the Boral. If it's like a mitered outside edge, I almost like to sand it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because if you scrape it off, it could peel a little bit.
Oh yeah. You just break the foam off by hand and then scuff it.
Is Gorilla? Do you have to like wet it with water or something? I feel like I haven't used it in a while. Or spray it or something. Making that up. We'll circle back on the next podcast on that one. Everyone's going to be spraying their Gorilla Glue into massive failures. Whoops, sorry guys.
So John, what's your 3 favorite non-construction related podcasts?
Oh, I mean, Joe Rogan, I do listen to. Dak Shepard, I listen to a lot. I just jumped on NPR and I started listening to a parenting podcast. So I'm like, if I'm developing everything else for my life, and I'm like,
it's so weird.
When I used to be a boyfriend, I don't think I was very good at it in the beginning. And same with like having a dog, I don't think I was a very good owner. And I'm like, by the time I realize I suck at being a parent, they're going to be old enough to like, I can't correct it. So I was like, you know what, man, you should just focus on a little bit of this. And, you know, with having a teenager, the world's changing and I feel like I can get frustrated very easily. And I'm like, I just need to understand what he's going through, you know? So
do you like the Dak Shepard podcast?
It depends on who the guest is and that stuff I do. My wife went hot and cold on it. But it's a good break. I listen to Rogan all the time. It's I like his guests.
I listen to Rogan. That's really the only one I listen to. But I don't listen to a lot. So.
But I jumped over to listen to Obama's. I'm trying to pull up what else I got.
You didn't ask me, but I'll tell you what my 3 favorites are.
What are your 3 favorite podcasts that you listen to that are non-construction, or are they construction related or non?
Because sometimes, like when I'm working out, or like if after a day of coaching, or just like I don't want to hear anything more about construction, you know. Especially nowadays, it's like.
So then let's talk about your favorite non-construction related podcasts.
All right, well let's do that time. So I would say number 1 is Revisionist History by Malcolm Gladwell.
Oh, Malcolm Gladwell, he's awesome.
Yeah, he's the guy that wrote Blink and Tipping Point, and really, really great. So the premise of this podcast is that he tells about events or things that have happened in the past that people really didn't understand, and he tells kind of the backstory behind events. Very, very cool. So the next one is 10% Happier by Dan Harris. Dan Harris is an ABC reporter guy, right? And so it's all about mindfulness and being present and all the stuff that I try to incorporate into my construction business as well as my life. And then third one would be Broken Record. So Broken Record, that's also with Malcolm Gladwell, but it's really more with I'm drawing a blank. What's the big producer's name? Will come to me in a minute. Anyway, he's done a bunch of they did Run the Jewel and a whole bunch. Rick Rubin. So Rick Rubin is the head guy, and Rick Rubin, has produced everyone from Johnny Cash to, Run DMC to, just a bunch of different groups. And he does these, he calls them liner notes for the digital age. So like if you're into music at all, totally eclectic stuff, but really, really cool podcast. So those are my three tops.
What's your favorite construction podcast?
Oh, well, gosh, I think it's the Modern Craftsman, I think.
Oh, good answer. All right, guys, let's keep them on. Now that I see you, I'm Tyler. I feel like, did you do the builder trend speech with? Okay.
Right.
Yeah,
so
that's
I did
where I met you.
the panel with Nick, and I think I must have met you afterwards, right?
Yeah, Tyler
maybe
was
right
there,
before we stopped in. I felt like you looked familiar.
Yeah, that's what I think. Yeah. So.
Yeah, so I had a gig.
Yeah, you were speaking at the same time.
Yeah.
But we had met at the builder trend discussion, but why I wanted you on the podcast, you have a couple different businesses. And I'd like to get into all of them, but you also, and you just kind of talked about it with the podcast that you listen to is mindfulness, and you've spent a lot of time kind of, I don't know if I'm going to use the word correctly, but Zen, like you're the Zen Builder, right? But what was the whole, how did you get there? Like I'm assuming, and I could be corrected, but I'm assuming it probably got to the tipping point, and you said, I need to restart. I need to kind of re-look at what I'm doing and, reassess how I'm going to approach this. And for me, hearing that you stuck with construction, because I feel like a lot of people get to the tipping point, restart their life and say, I'm not going back into construction. I'm going to do something different. You stuck with it. So I'd love to know what that story is. Yeah.
So that's a good intro. So I've been in construction for 30 years. So just a quick background. So I got, my first thing I did was a commercial job with my dad at a concrete tilt-up building, and right after college. And that's when I really fell in love with construction. So probably unlike many of you or the listeners who grew up in the trades and stuff, I knew nothing about construction. So when my dad bought this lot and plans for a spec concrete tilt-up and hired a contractor, I was out there every day, just fascinated with it. So, and I had already been accepted to Stanford Business School, so I knew I was going off to get my MBA. So I majored in real estate, and I was like, I want to get into real estate and construction. So my first job when in San Diego after business school was with a large commercial developer. And that's really where I cut my teeth. We were supposed to build 4.5 million square feet of space. And then the recession back then in early 90s hit, the big S&L crisis. And I ended up losing my job. So there was no jobs to be found in San Diego. And so I created my own job. And that's when I started. Actually, what I did was, this could be long, but we got a time, I guess. So my very first house, we closed escrow the very same day that I lost my job at the development company. And I literally went from the escrow office to sign papers to into my office, and the managing partner sat me down and said, hey, we met with Security Pacific last night, and we gave them the keys to the project. So they foreclosed on us, you're out of a job. And I'm like, are you kidding me? I just bought this house. And the house was a total fixer. So my wife and I went into shock and then decided to keep it. And for the next 6 months, I basically worked on that house. And I became a project manager. Again, didn't know anything about residential construction, but kind of learned through the School of Hard Knocks and coordinated the whole thing. And then out of that, I started my company, and out of that became an owner's rep. So that was kind of how I got into being an owner's rep. And I did that for many years. And then my crowning glory in my early days was in 2008, I built a 26,000 square foot house that cost $26 million to build. So $1,000 a foot. I mean, we built everything you could possibly build in this thing. It took us 5 years to build it. And we finished it the same month the market crashed in 2008. And my clients moved in to the house for 6 months. This was going to be their forever house, right? I mean, you spend 5 years and 26 million building this house, 17 bathrooms, 12 bedrooms, and they put the house up to sell. And and what happened for me was, and John, you probably may especially see this as a custom home, when you finish a house, that's the best marketing that you can have, right? So I figured I had built this house for 26 million. They're going to invite all their rich friends. They're going to all come to this house. They're going to go, oh my God, who did this for you? And then I say, we got this great owner's rep at Earl. And I figured I'd never have to market again. Well, obviously that didn't happen. So it was a really lean, 3, 4, 5 years for me. I mean, there was obviously a recession going on. No one was building estate homes anymore. And so I also kind of started becoming more aware, environmentally aware. And I had started studying under a Zen master named Thich Nhat Hanh back in '96, before all this had started. And he has a monastery he's from Vietnam originally. His main monastery is in France, but he had constructed a monastery in northern San Diego, a place called Escondido. And so every couple of years I would go up there to the retreat, and I was reading his books, and I started just feeling really out of alignment between my spiritual values and what I was doing for work. Because here I was building these giant monuments to people's egos, these giant homes that were just really no regard for the environment, or just take things over. And I just decided, it was time for me to find a different path. And so I hired a life coach, and I started going through a bunch of different things. And as part of that, I actually went on a 10-day meditation retreat up at the Deer Park Monastery. And this was, I think, 2012, maybe 2013, I think 2013. And while I was there on the retreat, one of the monastics got up and said, we're trying to build this nunnery for our sisters here. And we have some great plans from an architect, and it's going to be totally environmentally, it's going to be straw bale construction and all off the grid. It's going to be, zero net energy. But we don't know anything about construction, and we can't get this thing started. Does any of you know anything about construction? So I raised my hand. I said, yeah, I'm a project manager. I can help you guys out. So what started as a volunteer job, fast forward 6 months later, and I'm now a full-time hired employee of Thich Nhat Hanh's organization in the Deer Park Monastery to basically project manage and be an owner's rep for this new nunnery that's being constructed. So, but unlike all my previous owner's rep clients that were, gazillionaires, and the guy that I built the $26 million house was making $1 million, taking home $1 million a month. So, so he kind of figured that house would just take him 2 years to pay off. But so I went from that to having my clients be literally Zen masters. And so I started watching how they interacted with me and how they dealt with construction, and how they also incorporated in the design of their project. And I just realized that I could incorporate. I always felt like I had two lives, right? I had my personal life, which was my Zen practice, and then I had my professional life. And I thought they were completely separate. But through this about 3-year construction period that I had by working with the monastics, I found that I could actually blend them together, and that I could combine them, and that I could actually use my mindfulness principles and concepts of being engaged in the world and integrated with my perspectives with my construction business.
Going back to when you started your business, so you basically renovated your own home, and that's kind of what supercharged you into starting a business. But why did you go into being an owner's rep? Because I feel like the natural progression would be, oh, I renovated a house, I can do this. Why don't I go renovate, John's house down the street?
Right. Yeah. So I think because I just never felt like I was good enough to put the bags on and do it myself.
When you renovated your house, were you wearing the bags?
No, I was just telling people what to do. So this was the Stanford MBA approach, right? Like I create a schedule and I had my budget and I was talking with everyone and, putting the whole thing together, but I didn't do any of the work. So
did you see a hole in the market where you felt as though you saw other people trying to GC their home and failing at it?
Yeah. What I saw was the hole in the market was that the residential construction industry was so much less sophisticated than the commercial construction market,
Based on your few years experience with your dad and then the developer.
Right. So I had kind of seen, on the 27 or the 4.5 million square feet that we were doing, that was, I had pro formas and budgets and schedules and when we build an office building, a set of plans would be 150 pages, literally every spec is picked out in advance. There's no questions. And if you had a question, you RFP'd the architect, you got an answer instantly. Mm-hmm. So when I tried to do this on the residential side, I was like, this is crazy. No one knows anything. Everyone's flying by the seat of their pants. But most importantly, what I saw was this lack of communication and this lack of coordination, And so that was really how I worked. And my next experience after that, Nick, was actually working for my brother-in-law, who was from South Africa.
Sorry, and after what?
After I did the house myself, right? When I did the part of my house self, and then I hired, started my own business. He was from South Africa. He had just bought a house in Del Mar, and he was going to do about $500,000 of improvements to it. It was a brand new house, but he was doing this. So he and everyone on this block had all bought the houses at about the same time. In South Africa, it's very common to have an owner's rep, to have a project manager. And so he had hired someone, but they couldn't do it because they couldn't finish the other project in time. So he asked me to do it. So I came in, again, just serving as the owner's rep and communicating, coordinating, integrating between everyone. And everyone on that street closed escrow within a month of each other. And I moved my sister-in-law and brother-in-law into their home 3 months before anyone else, because all the other homeowners tried to do it themselves and schedule their painters and schedule the finish carpenters doing all this fancy, moldings and casework and all this stuff.
I guess, sorry to interrupt, but what's the difference between an owner's rep and then hiring a GC? Isn't that the point of hiring a general contractor is to... Well... You're smiling for those who can't see him. Yeah.
Well, yes,
we're
some...
not the most trustworthy people. It's like mechanics.
Well, I don't know. I just don't think that most GCs are capable of that. Like a GC, to build a house is very different than to manage a project. You could be a really successful GC. You've got a great group of subs or maybe your own crew. But if you don't really know how to, deal with the homeowners and schedule and coordinate, and that's the part that I find the biggest, and that's, at the Builder Show, what I talk about is that the biggest issue I think most builders have isn't in building the house. It's in dealing with the emotional homeowner and managing that drama and, reducing conflict and all that stuff that goes on, that interpersonal stuff.
It's the secret word, expectations.
Yeah, that's a big part.
That's the magic one, because...
I just thought the owner's rep kept the contractor from having direct contact with the client. You need a buffer.
Yeah. It's like a bodyguard.
Right. That's part of it, Tyler, but it really is true. How many builders... Well, now there's more, right? But most builders 20 or 10, 15 years ago, they didn't use a schedule. They didn't know how to use Microsoft Project. They didn't know anything about a cloud-based construction management system. I mean, still to this day, I usually am the person that comes in with Builder Trend or Co-Construct or whatever. I use a whole bunch of different ones depending on what project I'm on. And I run the project on the cloud-based system because the contractor doesn't know how to use it and won't use it. And so I have one contractor that actually hires me instead of the owner's rep. I actually work for the contractor and I manage the whole process for him. He doesn't even know how to sign into Builder Trend.
Is that
and
Nick?
I manage the entire process for him. Yes, Nick.
Ed, how does tell him?
What is that
you don't do health and
relationship?
safety, do you?
What does that relationship or experience look like the first time that you're working for a new general contractor? Because I feel like a lot of people would be hesitant to say, okay, let's let this owner's rep run the project.
Right, exactly. So I'll go back to the $27 million house. So when I was introduced to my client through his attorney. So as his attorney was drafting the construction agreement with the contractor, he said, look, I know how busy you are. There's no way you're going to have time to manage this. You should hire this owner's rep and let him do it for you. So he did. And he introduced me to his contractor. He'd already cut the deal with his contractor. And the deal he cut with his contractor was like a performance incentive-based deal. So he was like, look, he said, we're going to build the house. And when we're done, I'm going to appraise it. And I'm going to give you 25% of the difference between whatever it costs to build it versus what it appraises for.
Maybe he knew the market was going to tank.
No, he didn't. Right. So anyway, so when I get introduced, the GC says to me, he's like, look, buddy, he's like, I don't know why the hell you're here, and I don't know what the hell you're supposed to do, but you just stay the fuck out of my way and I'll stay the fuck out of yours and we'll get along fine. And that was it. That was how this relationship started. But by the end of it, you can get on my website and you'll see this guy on there. And he's like, Ed, we couldn't have built this project without Ed. Ed was the glue that held this whole thing together. And I never thought I'd say this, but I wouldn't build another house without an owner's rep.
It's funny, like Tyler, to your question, I feel the few owner reps I've dealt with are exactly what you said. It's just a buffer between the homeowner and us, and they're not doing anything other than asking the questions.
Yeah, I feel like they're not facilitating the process. They're basically just like, yeah, you can't actually talk to the homeowner.
Right. It's like, oh, let me ask if they want that tile. And then, yeah, they like that one. Can you get another sample as well, though? It's never been a schedule or, helping project.
Usually, I feel like I know John Marley's dealing with one, and it's dragging out schedule because it takes so much longer for them to get answers because now they're going through two people.
Well, I think, Ed, correct me if I'm wrong here, it all depends on the efficiency of the builder. That the experiences that, Nick, you've had, it's because you have built a trend, you're on top of these items. We've had the same type of thing where it's honestly just a walkthrough. Mm-hmm. So that way it's a second set of eyes for the client. We haven't had to go over, logistics, all that stuff. I mean, Ed, what are you finding when you meet a GC that is well versed in most of the management and scheduling expectations?
Well, and I think the other thing is you have to look at these owners reps. I mean, a lot of owners reps are attorneys or like administrative assistants or personal handlers of these people, and they don't know anything about construction. But for me, if you get someone like me that understands construction, we actually get things moving much more quickly. Like, so I just had an instance recently where they weren't sure where to frame the door. And I was able to tell them, okay, well, just don't frame the door yet, but at least keep moving, keep your framing crew there, keep framing. I'll get you an answer. I know my client's out of town, but by tomorrow night, what can you do to keep moving the project forward? And I know the wall's in the right place. We just don't know where the door is going to be, but keep the framing guys moving and I'll get you an answer by tomorrow night. And they're like, okay, great. Now, if the contractor couldn't get that, talk to an owner's rep, he may end up, calling his framers off because he's worried that he doesn't want to keep building without knowing from the owner. So I think a good owner's rep who understands construction in the process should be able to get those answers and keep that contractor moving forward until they get whatever direction they need from the client. So, and I think another thing too, and this is, I see it all the time. I say the same thing, and I'm just say all of you guys as contractors, I'll say the same thing that you guys would say to a client, but they'll hear it from me differently because I'm not their GC, right? I'm their professional advisor, trusted advisor person who's really doesn't have I'm paid on an hourly basis. So I don't have a financial interest. I'm not trying to keep them on a budget or whatever, but I'll tell them the same thing. And I've even had them tell me, they said, well, what did you tell them? And I said, well, that's what I told them. They're like, well, shit, I just told them the same freaking thing. And I'm like, yeah, but they just hear it differently from me because I'm their advisor and you're not.
Or in that case, you reinforce the same point that the GC made.
Yeah.
So that helps out. But Ed, what happens if you walk into a situation with a new builder, new client, and they are on top of the schedule and they are on top of the budget? Do you pull back and then become a second set of eyes, or how's this?
Yeah, I just talked to a prospective client last night, and he's like, he's so far into this thing, and he's like, yeah, and I live right down the street, and I'm like, okay, great. I said, I don't even need to be there. If you don't need me for site visits, I won't do site visits. I mean, I could just literally be kind of on call. It's kind of your, anytime you've got a question or something doesn't look right, just run it by me, and I'll give you whatever advice. So. Yeah, I mean, there's some clients I spend an hour a week on, and some I spend like 10 or 15 hours a week. It just really depends on the project.
Is this a team? Is it a team, or is it just you?
Yeah, no, it's just me. My wife kind of like on some jobs, if we've had ones where they want us to like handle the construction draws and monitor the insurance certs, and kind of more where they're almost like an owner's built, like an owner builder, and they just want us on. So in that case, then my wife will step in. She'll get all the prelims and the insurance certs and make sure everything's ready, and then do the draw funding from the bank, and then pay all the subs and all that kind of stuff.
Hold up, can we talk about how you are a master delegator? Forget about the Zen part. You just, as soon as it gets out of your wheelhouse, you're just like, I'm going to delegate that. You know what?
Exactly, yeah.
Bring in the missus. Do all the insurance circs and the draws.
What? I feel like you potentially are acting in the role of a GC on certain jobs if you have an owner that's hiring you. Is there like a crossover or a certain way that you kind of have to label your business where, like, I feel like if you were working directly for a customer where there weren't a GC on the job versus a GC, your scope would be somewhat different. How does that work for you?
So in my contract, Tyler, it specifically says, I am not a licensed contractor. I am not qualified or authorized to review construction's means and methods and, make representations on whether stuff is to code. So, it's kind of like a non-doctor giving medical advice, right? I mean, I have a lot of disclaimers. And so no, and even on the one where I said where my wife was so involved, we did have a GC on that job, but he was just paid like a flat kind of supervision rate for the project. And he didn't want to run any of the payments through his company. So he'd get charged the insurance for it. So he basically, the owner just paid him like a supervision role. He brought in his subs, he managed the project, he made sure it was built to code and to specs. And then we handled all the project management parts of it.
I feel like this was, we had a conversation with a builder, Mike from ECS, and that was how he used to run it, is that he was basically just hired on supervision. And the client they were doing direct payments to the client, to the subs. It was just like, it was strictly supervision. So you're basically at that point, it's running very similar, but you're basically overseeing the financial side of the contractor working, making sure that their insurance is up to date and they're getting paid and that it's accurate. at one time, how many projects might you have going on?
Right now, I don't have any because I'm so busy with my coaching business, which we can talk about in a little while. But actually, I take it back. I've got one project that I'm hired on, but this is a good one. These guys, it's not the way that I like to work, but they did not hire me until after they had hired an unlicensed contractor, gotten 3/4 of the way through their project.
Oof.
And the guy shows up in mid-COVID and says, I don't know where all your money went, but like, I can't finish your job.
Hey. What?
So, but no, so it just depends, Nick, on how involved my projects are. If it's something where I'm, 15 hours a week, then I'm maybe just doing 1 or 2 projects.
Okay.
But I never have more than, 4 or 5. And that was before I was doing all this business coaching. So
you did this $26 or $27 million home, and then you went to the Zen Master, you kind of reset yourself, you did a project for them. At this point, is your pool of clients that your owners rep for within that same pool of people, or are you back into?
Yeah, so it's interesting. You know what? I still build estate homes. And the aha moment for me was that it wasn't so much what I was building, it was how I was building it, that I was out of alignment with my personal values.
And how so?
Well, in a couple of ways. I mean, what I realized in working with the monastery was this approach that I now call collaborative construction, which is really realizing that everyone, like, they were so interested when we'd have site meetings, they as much wanted to have like the subcontractors there as well as the contractor and the architect. Like, they literally wanted everyone there at the table in this very balanced and involved process. And so I really realized that what I did was kind of what's called integrated design, or what most design build firms do, is to realize that, and this is the way I do all of my projects now, if they hire me early enough, I tell them, look, we're not going to hire the architect, draw your plans and go out and get 3 bids. That's a broken system. It never worked and it won't work.
Can I stop you there for a second?
Yeah.
Everyone keeps saying that it's a broken system, but I swear nothing is being done about it. It's like, right. I talked to an architect. We're looking at a project right now. We had the conversation. I want to say he slipped, but he basically was like, yeah, they're talking to 2 other builders. I'm like, whoa. That news to me. Like, I've been talking to this client for 3 months now. This is news to me, but okay. He's like, I know it's a broken system, but the husband just wants to make sure he's like, talking to a few people, has some options. I'm like, all right, so it's a broken system as well. And I know it's a broken system. Apparently the wife knows it's a broken system, but we're still dealing with the fact that the husband wants to consider other builders. So now we're appeasing one person and going back to the broken system, rather than being, like you said, collaborative and all saying, hey, that doesn't work and here's why. We need to approach it this way. So,
and it's all Google's fault. No, it is, because what's happened now is people are so used to being able, anything you buy, was the first thing you do is you get on Google, you type in the product, and you get prices from 5 different suppliers, right? You can figure out exactly what price you should get. You figure in shipping, you look at the reviews, you look at the pictures, like, exactly what you're going to get. And you would never, most people wouldn't buy until you had gotten prices from, 2 or 3 different people. So people don't understand that a construction project is totally the opposite of that. First off, what?
How do we fix that?
So, how you fix it is by getting people to understand that you can't buy a construction project based on price, and that price isn't the most important thing. And that unlike when you buy a pair of shoes on the internet, it's the same pair of shoes, it's just going to come from a different source. When you're buying a house or a construction project, there are no 2 pairs of shoes the same. Now, I always tell my clients, you have to realize we're building a prototype here. that no one has ever built this exact house before. Yeah, your builder's been building for 20 years, even if it's, say, a kitchen remodel. They say, well, he's done 200 kitchens before. Yeah, but he's never done, yeah, but he did my neighbor's. It's the same floor plan, the same. I said, yeah, but you weren't your neighbor. So there's no way it's the same. And I get people to understand that this is literally a kind of thing where you have one shot to get it right. You can't do a revision. I tell them, it's not like Apple. They push up an update in iOS, and they make all these mistakes, and they just send you a software update, 2 weeks later to fix that. You can't do that with a home. So it's just getting them to understand that a construction project is not a product like they can buy on the internet. It's not, you don't base it on price, you base it on the process. It's not the product itself, it's actually the process to get there.
I mean, that's the difference between a product and a service. I feel like a product, even if you had the same exact job, the same exact scopes, and you used all the same finishes, one builder versus another builder, it's going to be two completely different products at the end of the day, or jobs. Exactly.
So the approach that I use, and this was something I learned from an architect in San Diego, a guy named Don Edson, who was like an institution. He built the homes for everyone. And I remember talking to him, and he was saying the same thing, how the system was broken. And I was like, well, how do you fix it? And he said, well, Ed, you focus on the 4 controllable costs that any contractor has. He said, if you go out and bid an entire job, think about it. In San Diego, there's only really 3 or 4 good framing companies and 3 or 4 good plumbers. Let's take the plumbers. You've got these 1, 2, 3, 4 plumbers. They all know each other. They all know kind of where the prices are. They're all competing on the same jobs. All the same subs use them. You're going to get basically the same price for that plumbing part of the job. And the same thing for the framing. And so the only thing that changes are the 4 controllable expenses that a contractor has. And that's their insurance, their supervision, their profit, and their overhead. So he said, you can go out and price shop a contractor based on those 4 items before you even have a set of plans. And so what that allows you to do is, and this is where the collaborative construction comes in, I tell my clients, the week after we hire the architect, we're hiring your builder. Mm-hmm. We need to have your builder, your architect, your interior designer, and me on together within weeks of each other. And then together, you tell us what your budget is, and we'll design to that budget. And as a team, we will create and design this project, and with all of this input to make sure that it's to the budget. Because if you go and hire the architect, we all know that architects don't know how to design to a budget. They're going to over-design, they're going to draw something that's not within the client's budget. Then they go out and get 3 bids, and they throw the contractors under the bus, and that just doesn't work. So what I do is I go out to the builder and I say, okay, here's our general parameters. We're going to do it cost plus open book. And we're going to say it's, $2 million house, and it's whatever, 3,800 square feet. And tell me what your weekly supervision rate is. Tell me what your percentage for your profit and your overhead and your percentage for insurance. So the last 3 are all percentages. The first one is a fixed amount. And the reason I do that, and the reason I get supervision broken out separate from profit and overhead, is because that's where contractors get screwed. Is if they bid it on a job and then there's delays that are beyond their control, whether the client changing their mind or not getting selections in time or the weather. But if you agree upon that hourly or the weekly supervision rate, then that's a factor of, we think it's going to be 38 weeks to build your house at $2,000 a week for supervision. So I'm going to charge you $76,000 for supervision. Now, if it's less than 38 weeks, then we'll charge you less. Or if it's more, it's more. And if it's due to your framers not showing up because they got stuck at another job for a week, then we're not going to pay you for that extra week. We're going to document it and say that was, under your builder's control. But anyway, so that's how I can competitively bid contractors without a set of plans.
Yeah, but we're still in this mindset of, all right, well, that guy, wants to make this much profit, or his overhead's higher. Now you're competitively bidding against that, where it's. I mean, in my opinion, and to be frank, I don't think that's still not fair, because just because someone's overhead is higher doesn't mean that they're better or worse. And same thing with profit, and same thing with the supervision fee. I mean, a guy can come in and charge an exorbitant amount of money for profit and suck.
Yeah. No, I agree. And that's why, and my clients, I don't usually recommend that they take the lowest price, even when we're just factoring in those 4 factors, right? I mean, these clients are driving, very expensive cars. They could buy much cheaper versions, and they don't buy the cheapest car. They're not going to pick the cheapest contract.
I think it all comes down to education. I think, how many guys, I'm a stickler on, if I were to buy a TV, I look at every comparable TV.
That's the first thing I thought of when he said that.
Right?
I bought a TV and I was in Best Buy looking online like, it's the same price everywhere. That's great.
And I'll go to every store and I'll just do my due diligence is what I feel like, so I feel comfortable spending said money. If it's $3,000, it's $3,000, but I want to make sure I'm comfortable with it. And for a lot of people, I was just at a client, first time encounter with the client architect, and it was just like, this is the only time you might ever do this. So I think that's the thing, is that, Nick, no matter how long this goes on, it's improving, because social media, you're able to educate yourself on who's out there and what's available to you now at your own terms. But when it comes down to it, there's still a huge amount of the market that's not driving the Rolls Royce or the high-end stuff. That someone told them about that car, and the luxury, a part of that is that there's a huge part of this market that literally is, if you're getting a deck, I'm going to call every deck guy that comes up in my Google search and get that price point. And I'm sure those guys do that. The whole point is when you do get to the plate, how do you stand up to the other guys that, like Nick, you said, maybe the overhead and profit is a better number, but maybe that PM sucks and you just don't get along with them. Like immediately, there's no vibe there. So, and I think you get a lot more of that with people, Nick, correct me if I'm wrong, that are experienced in this industry, that, hey, I've done a few renos under my belt, maybe second home.
Yeah, that's my point. I think that's my point, is that I've been in the position, Ed, like you're talking about, is where they're like, hey, don't worry about all the line items. We just want, these four items: your insurance, your supervision, your overhead and profit. And I'm like, and then what? Like, I'm just gonna submit my numbers, and then you guys are gonna make a decision? Because what are you basing that on? The fact that my insurance costs more, or I want to make more money in profit than the guy down the street? Like
that I include myself under comp, and someone else doesn't. Like,
right. It's like there's so many
the margin.
And it's, John, you're right. It's about them being educated and having experience in it. It's so where I'm trying to avoid, like, obviously we get to that. Absolutely. We're looking, when the job I mentioned a few minutes ago, we had a meeting today, and I went through and I did a line item, estimate based on very, very preliminary high level drawings. And I had already been in process with it, and I had found out there was other 2 builders I met today. I'm like, hey, listen, no problem. Here's a preliminary estimate. The drawings aren't complete. They're very loose, but we're right on where I said we would be as far as price, per square foot for this renovation. This is, and this is how I foresee this breaking out. But anything further than this, I mean, at that point, we're into pre-construction, and we get paid, we get compensated for it. Because we've done the due diligence to show you how we would approach the project. You've had an opportunity to meet with me and one of my project managers. If you can now's the time to make a decision.
So Nick, on that, how was that approach, that meeting? Who dictated that agenda? Meaning it be about the numbers.
What do you
get me? Like, I'm trying to understand that meeting you were in, where
today,
you met with them. Yeah, that meeting today. That like I just went to one last week.
So
it was never about numbers. It was really to see if we meshed.
Client reached out a few months ago. We had met in person on the job site, walked the job, walking around. Yep, I understand the scope. I understand kind of what you're looking to do.
So active job, or just
someone just moved out. They just acquired it.
Gotcha.
So there's nothing. It's just an empty job. It's a 2-story brownstone condo. Walking around, understanding the size of it, looking around, comparing it to other projects. All right, you're probably in the ballpark of this much money to renovate. All right, yeah, that's pretty much kind of where we thought. And then we basically kept that conversation open over the course of the next couple months. And then they had I had introduced them or made a couple introductions to architects. They signed an architect that I didn't know, said, hey, we're getting drawings done for some preliminary design. We'd like you to price it, just to see where we're at. I'm like, yeah, no problem. So I get
architect's fault. The whole multiple bidders.
Right. Well, yes. So we get the preliminary drawings. I hop on the phone. Yep, they're talking to two other builders. I'm like, all right, news to me, but that's fine. Let me take a look at the drawings. All right, this is, I can spend an hour, 2 hours max on this and kind of, understand what this is. I go through it. I look at it. I price out what is drawn. I'm exactly where I expected to be. And I sent that over. I'm like, hey, we're right on par where we said we would be. It's my understanding that there's a couple other people looking at it. Happy to, meet on site. So we did. We facilitated a meeting on site, met with the architect for the first time, brought a project manager with me, walked the job again, spoke about our process, and just restated how this is as far as we go at this point. This is that preliminary estimate phase. But for us, if we're comfortable with this number, because we were literally to almost the dollar exactly where we said we would be. So at this point,
my question to you is how much did you take away from that client and the architect on their process and their expectations during that meeting, and not make it about numbers? Like if you want to change it, you didn't change anything.
I didn't bring. It wasn't about the numbers. It was to meet the architect.
I know. I guess my point is what did you learn? What was your takeaway from that part of it where this is their process? Meaning,
right.
I know if I meet that architect and I meet that client, and now, you had the influence in the beginning. Mm-hmm. You were the main person in that discussion. Now the architect's back in. You can go to that meeting within 10 seconds realize, all right, the architects now influence the client more than I can kind of get them off the rails.
I would agree with that.
Of this, and then figure out what is it that they're looking for. Maybe in the beginning they were your client, and now they've had this relationship and this partnership with the architect, they may not be that person anymore.
I 100% agree, and that's exactly why I wanted to go, is to figure out where the influence was coming from. And in the conversation, I realized that I believe that I still have the influence. So I left that meeting with everyone having a clear understanding where we stood and what our next steps were. And, just my process in general is that, all right, I'll get you what you guys need, and we'll look forward to a commitment, and we'll get started on this project, whatever, in this time frame. So, I guess I'm talking about my delivery. My delivery is typically always assuming that we're doing the job. But the influence, I agree, John. I feel as though a lot of times I'll go to those meetings and I'll realize I don't have the influence, and at that point I usually bow out.
No, I guess it sounds like a sales tactic right now. I guess I wanted to understand, when I walked away from my meeting on Friday, I brought Benny along, high-end architect that we wanted to be with, got the introduction to the client, and I didn't want it to be about numbers at all. I wanted it to be about why they're doing this renovation.
Yeah.
What is their goal out of this renovation? The neighborhood. Obviously, you're knocking a house down. You've gone through a year of due diligence. Meaning I want them to understand I have empathy where they are. Mm-hmm. Ed, I'm sure this is where you come in, is that you understand all that, so you're creating these, you're guessing 2 steps ahead, and then it happens and they're like, all right, love you, Ed, just take it from here. But it's my thing was hey, this is the worst part. I pulled up and knew there was a truck in front of me.
Yeah.
And I parked on the street, so that kid didn't feel like he was all someone's over his shoulder. I had a little bit of empathy for the entire situation. And I guess my thing was I wanted them to understand that I didn't want to look at the drawings, look at the numbers. I wanted to look at the property. Mm-hmm. I when we got up and started walking around, I was like, what trees do you want to save? Are any of these sentimental to you? It's really, that's the overall thing.
It's the same thing, John. You're going there assuming you're doing the job, and you're explaining how your process.
No, I didn't. I wanted to know. I wanted to have a connection beyond that stuff, because if we want to change that thing, anyone that comes to the table that the architect's bringing, it should be the same numbers, should be the same execution. None of those things should be in question. So it comes down to who do you want to work with.
Right, and I'm not saying it as you're approaching it with a cocky attitude. I'm saying that you're going in there already in the mindset of all right, it is my project.
Only when I'm on the podcast. I only sound cocky on the podcast.
But that's the point. It's like you're in there asking what trees they want to save. Like, you could on the other.
I'm trying to make a connection. That's all I'm trying to do.
Right, but the connection is based on the fact that you're envisioning you doing the job. That's the mindset you're in. You're picturing doing the job. All right, what's important to them? What does this project unfold? And that's the initial meeting, where I was in this case meeting too. But it goes back to the question, Ed, and you started to explain it, but got back. I feel like you started going down the road and you whipped back to this competitive bid on those percentages. But is that and we totally derailed there, but is it really? Are we really fixing it by doing that?
Yes, in that. Well, first off, I'll tell you that sometimes if I've got clients, and I love, by the way, exactly what you said, John. When I'm working with my contractor coaching clients, I say exactly what John said. You never want to compete on price. If you're competing on price, then they're not your client. And I have some clients that are like, you know what? We're just going to interview 3 builders and pick them based on who we feel we have the best fit with. Some clients want to do the price shopping. So it's only if they want to, quote unquote, price shop, then I'll use that approach. So I'm not kind of promoting that as as a requirement, but if they want a price shop, it gives them a chance to be able to just compare, different builders and feel, check that box off. But I always tell them, don't make the decision based on price. Price should not be your highest priority. If you want, we'll go out and get, quotes from 2 or 3 of these guys and find out where they are on supervision and profit and overhead. But that should not be your deciding factor. So, but it just, again, depends on the personality of my client. The guy I talked to last night, he's already picked his builder. And he's picked his builder because he's doing an ICF house, and there's not a lot of builders in San Diego that know how to do that. So, he's kind of already set. He really even priced the guy. So, it just really depends on the clients. But I guess the point, Nick, is what I'm trying to say is getting away from that, getting 3 bids. And I think if you're only comparing those 4 components, it gives you less to focus on, and you're not saying, oh, well, your numbers are good, but why is your roofing number, 10, 15% higher than the other guys? You don't even focus on that stuff.
It's funny though, because I feel like when it is everything else, it's never about the roofing number. It's always, hey, everything looks good, like that all adds up, but why is your fee so high?
Dude, it's a test. 100%. I've had clients who have spent millions of dollars on stuff. They want to know how you answer that. And when I say by how, your tone, your delivery, what you're explaining and how you're explaining it.
How would you answer it?
Which one?
John, why is your fee so high?
No, it's not high. It's really when you break everything down.
The delivery could be better. Let's try again. John,
one of the questions I got at my meeting was, how do you plan on staffing this project?
Yeah.
And because that question in itself is wide open. Mm-hmm. Like Nick, you brought a PM. That scares the crap out of me, because if they don't connect with that individual person that you've now picked for them, that could have been what knocks you out of the game. Like I'm just saying, but the reality is that at a certain point, like at my meeting, it was like, hey, how do you plan on running this? I'm like, I'm going to have a site super here. And usually we balance those supers between 2 projects, because it's really how you can, best utilize budget and not be too management heavy. But but if you guys feel like there's more of a need for management, then we can then readjust the budget. But as we look at it this way today, this is how we plan on doing it. And if we want to have someone there full time, we can then slide that budget a little bit that way and have that. And for PM, we'd have somebody that also bounces from job to job, and the architect steps in and goes, that will be you. So it wasn't an option to have a PM run that. I will be the guy that'll be the point person, and then my superintendent will be below me. How I plan on bringing in a PM and filter them in day to day, it's up to me. Mm-hmm. But I didn't bring anyone to that meeting to say, hey, I need them to trust me. Mm-hmm. And at that point, once they trust me, they'll trust the team. But if I bring people in there and try and influence that selection before it happens, I could be totally wrong. So Ed, jump in here.
I personally feel like if you want to get away from people price shopping in the industry, or that it's a broken system. You truly need to offer something that other people don't offer. So if an architect comes to you with 3 contractors and they're all on an equal playing field, then yeah, they're going to choose on possibly personality or the connection. But if there's always got to be some sort of value to what these people do. If you're the most expensive and they don't necessarily want that quality, then they're probably going to get other numbers to see if it makes sense to pay that much more for that higher quality. I think that in order to get away from price shopping, you have to find your customer and you have to be a good fit and you have to offer something, whether it's speed, whether it's execution, whether it's cleanliness, whether it's your team, that nobody else can offer, because then they won't necessarily care about the price because they just want you and they know that nobody else can do what you do. And I think until that happens, or until you offer that, it's always going to come down to price. It's going to come down to whether they can value that cost increase for what they actually need out of that project.
It's interesting, Tyler, all the stuff that you said there, and I don't know if this was intentional, was all process factors. It wasn't anything to do with the final product. I mean, you didn't talk about quality of craftsmanship or workmanship or fit and finish. You talked about, speed and personality, which I agree. I think for most homeowners, it is more about the process than the product. But was that intentional, or was that?
No, because I think that does have something to do to it. Like for me, I stay the size that I am because I'm on the job every day and I handle everything, and we're handling from conceptual design through finish. So I know that I can deliver, and I'm not trying to come off as arrogant, but I know that I can deliver a higher quality product because there's no lack of communication, because I'm there, because I can bounce between trades to get a higher finished product than somebody who's managing multiple people on that job. I may not be the fastest, but if somebody who's going to hire me is going to hire me because of our level of execution and the fact that we can be in your house while you're living there and maintain a high level of cleanliness and safety. So nobody's going to hire me because I'm going to get their job done the quickest. Nobody's going to hire me because I'm the least expensive. Nobody's going to hire me because my processes of dealing with customers is completely fine-tuned and I'm getting bills out on time. They're hiring me, and that's what I'm selling. I'm not selling things that I can't deliver. And I think that that's how I get away from actually competitively bidding most of our projects, because I'm like, here's what we offer. If this is what you want, we'll make that work. But I can't sell somebody on, hey, you know what, we do really good work and we're going to get out of your house is faster than anyone else is going to, because other people can do that way better than I can.
So to flip it around, Tyler, how do you, I know you have an amazing vetting process, but how do you sniff that out early? I think that's the thing. Like Nick thought he had it with that client, and then it changed somehow in between. Same with me. I've been there where it's like we're the only people, and then you're the whole time for the next 2-3 months you're like, is there anybody else? Like, you get me? Like, there's always this doubt. So how do you sniff that out?
I mean, I feel like Nick should have had something put in place prior to now. You've spent a lot of time on this, probably because it's a job that you want, and you're doing things that you wouldn't do for other customers if this wasn't a job that you felt like would be a really good fit for you. Or something that you just really want to do. I feel like
that's usually when things sway, right? It was definitely, we looked at immediately into our putting a pre-construction agreement in place, but they had communicated that they were dealing with other projects that they need to wrap up, and that they wanted to find an architect that they liked first. So I was just letting it kind of like that, everything kind of trickle into place. But John, I don't know when it got to a point where they're like, hey, let's talk to other builders, and whether it was influenced by the architect or the husband. I'm assuming it was probably always the consideration, and that's kind of why they, at one point said, well, no, let us wrap up this and let us find an architect that we like, and then we'll be in touch. And
I think I think that at that point, earlier on than you anticipated, they probably weren't as good of a fit as you thought. And like maybe you didn't know that, but I don't think that you were offering them enough for them to say, hey, you know what? Money aside, we just want to go with this guy. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's the only way that you're going to get away from anyone. It doesn't matter how much money you have. It's always going to come down to, well, does it make sense to pay a third more to use this guy? Even if it's absolute perfection, it doesn't matter how much money somebody has. They're still going to kind of value that. So unless you can put, hey, nobody can execute at the level that we do. Hey, nobody can get this done as fast as we do. Hey, nobody can be as clean and as tidy as we can. That's what they're going to value and pay. Basically, okay, whatever it costs, it costs. It's just like if you look at an exotic type of car or a restaurant or a hotel, you have to offer something that nobody else can offer for them to be like, hey, I'm not going to price the hotel down the street because we want to stay here because they have this roof. Like
they all have beds, they all have rooms, they all have a view. Something has to be brought to the table that's exceptional.
Exactly.
And they have to know
money that it's worth it to them, no matter how much more that money is. And if not, they're going to look at what 4 hotels in the area have comparable pricing because it's all the same at that point. If it's not the same, that's when somebody will pay twice the amount for a hotel room to sleep in because they just want that experience, or they just want that product, or they just want to be in, they want that view.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I think that that's very hard on a bigger scale for a construction company. But again, it depends on what you're selling and what you're pitching. If it's speed, if it's price point, you have to figure out, those customers early on, why they're coming to you.
Right.
So Ed, how are you doing that with your, not so much coaching, but your client base? How are you getting clients? Are they coming from word of mouth, or is it more architects or, attorneys, or what's your lead generator?
Mostly word of mouth. Yesterday's lead was from an architect that I work with, actually the one that did with the monastery. But, the reason why most of mine has to be word of mouth is because, most people don't even know that someone like me exists. So they don't even know what an owner's rep is. I mean, you guys all do because you probably work with it. But your average people don't know that. They just think, hey, I'm going to build a house. I need a good builder. I need a good architect and a creative interior designer, and then I'm good to go. And that's when I always say, well, who's going to manage that group? And they go, well, don't they just kind of work it out by themselves? And I'm like, no. So it's really, and that's the biggest challenge I have in my marketing, is that I can't just sell my service. I have to educate people on what I do and why it's important and what my value is. And I'm in a mastermind group, and one of the guys told me, he says, Ed, you solve a problem that most people don't know they have. So that's the challenge that I have.
So, going back to, I want to dig into it just a little bit more, and I know I want to get to the coaching thing, but really beyond just working for, say, clients that, were building $26 million homes, and, what was there had to be, I'm assuming that there had to be one thing that really disconnected you from your spiritual value to what you were building, more so than the fact that they had no regard for climate and they were just building these massive buildings. But what was that? Maybe there wasn't, but what was that one thing that really triggered that decision?
I think it was Nick. It was focusing on the product, focusing on the final product and not realizing, because even back in the day of the $27 million house, I was still doing a lot of what I do now, which is, reducing conflict and kind of smoothing the process and trying to take this kind of compassionate, present-centered approach to the management of the project. And I just wasn't really giving enough benefit to the process and really focused on the product. So, like today, I'm still building these giant homes, but I feel like, that's the owner's decision. But the process of what I'm guiding them through, I'm reducing not only their stress level, but amount of conflict and misunderstandings that occur between the team, and all of that gets reduced because of what I do. So, and I see the value in that, and so I probably put more attention on that now than I did prior.
So I'm going to try to reword that. So why a Zen Master? Why not just not build for a $26 million client?
Yeah. Why just not do it?
Like what led you to? I mean, you talk about a life coach. You talk about the Zen Master. I'm just right. I'm fascinated by that. I don't understand it, and I'm fascinated by it. And that you've went as far as to brand yourself as the Zen Builder, but I feel like
hold up. Was that a nickname given? I feel like nicknames have to be given. Did someone give that to you?
Yeah, they actually did, and it came about as a result of me working on the monastery. They were like, "Oh yeah, you're the Zen Builder. Yeah, you work at the monastery." So that's how that all came about. Yeah. So, and that was really, and then the other thing that came out of that was that once I gave a speech at the monastery, and it was called Building Zen, and I talked about how we incorporated the concepts of mindfulness into the 3 areas of the project, into the design of the project, into the materials that we use, to the actual construction of it, and then into the process and how we used Thich Nhat Hanh talks about these 5 mindfulness principles and how we incorporated these mindfulness principles into each of those 3 components. And then I gave that speech at the monastery. It was so successful that I kind of incorporated it into, and I gave it at the Builder Show the next year in Vegas, and then the next year they asked me in Orlando to give it twice because it was so popular. And then I kind of started doing stuff with Neri, and that's how it led into my coaching. So it was just interesting how I went from this career crisis and getting ready to leave construction altogether to within, 2 or 3 years, I was not only still doing my owner's rep, but I was a public speaker and a business coach, and developed this whole process as a result of that experience.
So, okay, so I don't think you answered the question, but why Zen? Like, why life coach? Why, what really, like, why was it a life decision? And I think about, like, myself, right? Like when there's stress, and we talk about this on the podcast, it's like none of us, go more than, I'd say, a week without being like, why are we doing this? Like, what, like, question, like, this is just why this isn't, like, or going through this thought of, like, this isn't worth it.
I feel like there's nothing Zen about our jobs right now. And, like, how do you even get there?
And I think that's why I keep asking the question, because I'm like, I feel it. There's so many times where it's not. My mind is so far out of it where it's, at some points it's just like, this isn't good for my health. This isn't good for myself. But then there's other times where it's, it's incredibly gratifying and I love it, right? But I've never looked at correcting. Like, I work with a business coach. I've never thought about working with a life coach to correct my business. Mm-hmm. And I think that's my disconnect here is, rather than saying, all right, let me work with a business coach to correct the business I'm in, you said, I'm going to work with a life coach and a Zen master.
Yeah. Ed, this is actually an interview.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what's interesting is what the life coach found, and we did all these tests and we did strength finders and all this stuff. And I looked at all these different careers. And in the end, we found that, project management and what I was doing was the best fit for my skills. And that, what I do as planning and organizing and mediating and communicating and all the kind of real skills that I had, my superpowers, if you will, all had the best fit with the project management. So it made me relook at it and go, wow, so maybe I don't need to change my career. I just need to change my approach and what I'm looking at. And like I said, I was doing a lot of this same work before I called myself the Zen Builder, but I didn't really value it. I didn't realize how important it was to have a person that could, communicate between everyone on the team and keep everyone calm and kind of buffer between that eccentric, high stress client and kind of be able to serve that role. And that's what I do. And that's where you mean, like, where does the Zen come from? I think it comes from that, right? So
that's a huge burden on you, though. So how do you deal with that stress and that burden? A
couple of things. I don't take it personal. I realize that people are the way they are, and I just don't take it personal. And I think that's a huge thing. At the last Builder show, I talked about I don't know if you guys know the 4 Agreements, the book, The 4 Agreements. You ever heard of that?
No.
I think I have.
It's by a guy named
I don't know if I agree with it.
Yeah, it's by not a Zen master, but this guy's a Native American wisdom guy, and he wrote this book called The 4 Agreements. And so the 4 agreements are, the first one is be impeccable with your word. So do what you say and say what you do. The second one is don't take anything personal, which is, a huge one for contractors, right? We take things personal all the time. And so what I tell people is, like, when your client screams at you about the tile or the cabinets, you have to realize that it doesn't have anything to do with you. It has to do with them and what they're going through. Maybe they just got in a fight with their spouse, or they're pissed off about something else, and it came out in your meeting about the tile. But don't take it personal.
So Ed, I totally get you there. Like, at any given day, someone can bring something home to you. Like, you're the punching bag for 8 to 10 months. The problem is that it's not so much that screaming part of it. It's the accountability part, where if something falls apart, meaning if you're the one that's going to be, I've definitely, the problem I have with this is the person that told me about this book didn't actually fulfill its prophecy. Meaning that they talked about it, they talked a great talk, but then didn't actually follow through. So it had some bad implications. But I guess my point is that, I guess they can yell about the tile, and they can yell about all these different things, and they can just yell at you to yell at you. The question comes to you is that, like, when you promise to get a home together and pull all these pieces together, and that you want this experience, basically, Nick, in the beginning, when you sell that part of the process, that's the burden I'm talking about. That underlying burden that most people don't see, but you're always trying to fulfill. And I do take things super personal. And I think that's also what's got me successful. But the flip side of that is I wake up at 3 a.m. to the voices. So how do you cope with that? That's because now it's all on you. Now the builder's actually off the leash, off the hook.
Right. So that kind of goes to the 4th agreement, and we skip to the 3rd one, but the 4th agreement, which is always do your best. And notice that it says do your best. And it's important to know that your best changes day to day and moment to moment. And that's all you can do is your best. And your best means that you're going to screw stuff up sometimes, and you're going to drop the ball, you're going to miss stuff. But did you do your best that you could in that time and in that circumstance? And it goes back to what I was saying about the prototype, right? I mean, every job we do, we've got a prototype. We've never done this before. And we're not building this 10 times over and we can work out the problem. So inherently, every construction project is going to have problems. You're going to make mistakes. You just have to. And so, you accept those and you move on, and you don't cover them up. You go to your client. If you, again, goes back to what you said, John, setting expectations. And if you get your clients to understand that this is a prototype and there are mistakes that are going to be made and I'm going to screw up. And when I do, I'm going to tell you about them and we're going to work to fix it. But you can't give yourself this unrealistic expectation that, you have to be perfect all the time, because there's just no way you can do it, especially in construction.
My question is, like, that book, I get that for, like, being a friend and being, like, in a relationship, like, between my wife and I, like, give my best, don't take things personal, like, being friends with Nick, stuff, get me, like, I totally understand. I've thought a lot about that book and everything about it, and I can understand that. But then when you start getting paid to do something and you have roles and responsibilities, this is almost what Nick and I get into all the time, is that, if you're going to charge X amount of money and have a management team, and then still, as I put it, a cop out and say shit happens, then same thing with the book is like, well, I'm going to do my best, I'm going to do all this, but then you get this kind of line where it's like your best is on a price tag, and I'm paying that price tag without question because I want this. So I used to say, hey, I'm trying, and I used to get told, well, I didn't pay you to try, I paid you to do. And it's like, then people spin it on you, and then you're like, after all that, then you drive home taking it personal. So it's like, it's just really, this is a massive struggle I have. And trust me, I would love to be able to read that book and be like, I got this. But I'm doing it for 25 years and I can't figure that out. And I'm getting red right now and sweating thinking about it because it is something I struggle with on a daily basis because our clients could have picked any number of people to do this. And we embarked on this journey together. And like when we try and hit stuff and you try and give all the explanations and give them all the updates and set expectations, and they see that you're doing your best. They see all the complications and everyone you work with and all the things that change into moving target. It's really tough to actually do any four of those things. You get me? Like people don't see that on a daily basis because now you're dealing with their biggest investment, with their life savings, and you can take all the other stuff that we talked about and throw it out the window because now it's their life. You're messing with their life, and that's why lawyers get involved. That's why there's this redundancy in sometimes having a client liaison there. So I don't know. I guess, how do you deal with the stress? Like, you really are able to walk away going, I gave my best. That product's falling apart. It's burning. Like, how do I put that out and not? I guess so. Yes. To close this out, I think people can do that on a lot of their day jobs where it's 9 to 5. But like, if that product's falling apart, I take things personal where I need to vet out how to solve that all night, all day, through the next 2 weeks to get it done. And I think that's what I do add value to. But if I shut it off at 4 p.m., had my second phone nick, and just shut it down, like, where's that put me in the value scale for people?
Well, this isn't a life and death matter, right? I mean, we are just still building homes. So, I mean, it just seems to me you put a lot of pressure on yourself to get everything right. And you're human and you're going to make mistakes. And if you've managed those expectations from the beginning and you're working with clients that see this as a partnership and that know that you're going to be open and honest with them, and when you make a mistake, you're going to tell them, maybe at the beginning, you say, look, this is a prototype. I've built lots of homes before. I've never built yours. I'll just tell you one thing right now, which is I'm going to make a mistake. Some point in this process, I'm going to make a mistake. But I will tell you this, I'm going to tell you when I make that mistake, I'm going to do everything I need to fix that mistake, and I'll work through it. But you kind of let that know in advance because that's the truth. I mean, have you ever had a project where you didn't make any mistakes?
No, true. I mean, that's name of the game. I guess it's just the mistake part of it isn't, I guess I'm just trying to I'm trying to clarify the gray area, which is not easy to do. But it's like, it's those little moments where you're trying to make everything work, but yet you don't want to let people down. So I get the mistake part is really black and white. It's really just trying to, make everything work. And I mean, I get it. Like, if a tile doesn't work, I'll do all the provisions before that, lay out the whole lot on the floor, have someone pick it all out, do all that. I've only had one project in my entire career where we went through months and months of planning with all the right people in place, where it wasn't on me. It was actually at a point where I just had to execute. And I think that's what at a certain level, especially the clients you deal with, there's architects, there's designers, there's a lot of people that have their foot in the door to make a decision. So when it gets back to the builder, I just got to execute. So it's really not as hard to do at that point. You're relying on drawings and there's enough, fail safes to catch it. But I still, we had this entire design for a kitchen. Unbelievable. We had a 16-foot island made by Brooks. We had all these little samples made from New York, everything. Paint colors were approved, all that. And I remember when we finished it, and the client walked through and she started crying. And then I realized it wasn't for joy. She legit despised the whole kitchen. After 7 months, right. absolutely took that personal, and that has been a root of like vetting. Like when I was told the other day, Nick, you know this, where I was told to stay in my
Where
lane.
the heck was she the other 6.5 months where this was coming together?
But she was pregnant, and this is a designer they had for, I don't know, 10 years prior to this. So there was a big relationship that was built up there where there was a lot of trust. Things were decided, blah, blah. But, you know, I do have a hard time staying in my lane because I did stay in my lane there. Mm-hmm. I did everything that was asked of me, but I still take it to heart that the final result wasn't what they wanted. And then to go back to like your spirit and how you are efficient and don't waste and all these other things, these factors that come in as being a human with the planet, then it's like, now I'm throwing all this stuff away. You know, there was a La Canu stove that was green that was brought in from France that she hated when she saw it when it was next to the cabinet color. And I'm like, how does this happen? Like, how do I put my name on that situation, that experience at that point? Like, so you get me? So I don't know. I know it's a loaded question.
Well, and I mean, I would say you don't put your name on it because that's not your fault. I mean, that's beyond your control. And the fact that she came in and, you know, was crying tears of unhappiness shouldn't really impact is not a true judge of how well you did in that project. Because that's something that's beyond your control. I mean, you're kind of setting, if your reward is coming from other people's reactions that you can't control, then you're setting yourself up for a situation that is, I mean, you might as well like go to Vegas and gamble because you have no control. I mean, you have more control in Vegas. You understand what I'm saying? You can only worry about what you can control. And so you're worrying about things that are beyond your control and taking it as your own responsibility, when the fact is that if you can't control it, it can't be your responsibility.
It's Nick, you can jump in here, but I feel like a lot of the times we are the people that are in control.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in because I feel like I'm in this position very recently. And John, same page. Take everything personally. It's like the moment something, it doesn't even have to be bad. It can be like, hey, you know, like, I didn't like this. Or, hey, could you just make sure you email me at the end of the day and let me know what you're doing tomorrow? It's like the fact that I didn't email them the day before will literally haunt me the rest of the week. And I used to drive home from the podcast. Now I am home, but I would drive home from the podcast thinking about it and like, you know, just beating myself up. But it, on Ed's side, it's like, he's absolutely right in the sense that we can't take it personally, and I know that's way easier said than done. Maybe we need a Zen master, but the fact of the matter is, what Ed, you said is this isn't life or death, and I oftentimes have to remind myself, and you know, even more recently, it's like we have a project that we're wrapping up, and it's always the wrap up. It's always the very end of the project where it's like, man, we forgot to ask for extra time based on all the additional scope we added, or we never accounted for certain things. And it's like, rather than just like taking a breath and saying, hey, we just need an extra week, it's, hey, we need to cram all this work into, you know, the remaining time we have left. And then everyone gets stressed out, where it's like, okay, even if they're upset with the fact that it's a week late, it's not life or death. It's not like they can't, in this particular case, it's not like they can't move in. It's at the end of the day, everything's going to be just fine. And we go through these wild emotions of like stressing ourselves out to appease one particular decision based on, you know, thousands of decisions we've made up to this point. And it goes into this unnecessary spiral. And I feel like, you know, after a few days of thinking this way, I was driving home one day and I'm like, what am I doing? It's like, why? Like, this is, I'm stressing myself out. I'm stressing my team out. My team knows I'm stressed out. It's like, this isn't, I just for the sake of my team, like you know, I'm calling myself the leader here, but it's like, I can't be stressed. That's not good. That's not a good look. And it's going to
look. It's just you're supposed to be the guy that diffuses things,
right? And it's like
calms it down.
And the fact of the matter is, I wasn't. I was letting it snowball because I was taking it personal. But in my realization, it's like, no, we're in this position because we're committed to putting our best foot forward. We're committed to doing our best work. Always, and I talk about this a lot, is like, as long as someone can stand back and say, that's the very best I can do, that's all I ask. Because we're never going to be perfect. And I hate when people say, oh yeah, we can do this perfect. It's like, no, you can't. Like, all I want you to do is do your very best. And
those are huge words. Those are big labels.
Huge.
It's tough to have those involved.
But that's, what has been deemed the rip it out mentality. It's like, that's how we operate. If it's not your best, like, it gets ripped out. And this is where, like, Ed, earlier you said there's no redo here, and it's like, I would argue that because we redo a lot, and it's, because I pay for it. But it's like, because we're committed to, that's what people aren't paying for us to redo it. People are paying for it to be executed at a very high level, and that's what we're committed to doing. So always always doing your best is something that I hold really close to me.
But is that where a lot of the pressure's coming from? Trying to maintain that standard and execute at that level at the scale that you are.
I would say that's where the pressure's coming. Yeah.
And a lot of that is probably
spread thin as you are, because that's what I was thinking. That's how I feel.
But I think that a lot of that is self-inflicted, and
100%.
Not necessarily because your customers aren't going to notice it, but because that's what you're selling to these customers.
Yeah.
And when these customers hire you, that's basically why you feel as though they're hiring you. And it would be the same thing as if you sold them on, we're going to get your job done in 10 weeks.
Right.
And you went over and you were like, we're a schedule-driven company. Yeah. That pressure is coming from you the entire time. And
Absolutely.
You brought that on before you even started the job.
Which is like, the client could walk in and be like, oh no, don't do that. I still don't, even though you're pointing it out, I still don't notice it. It's okay. It's still like, it's the way I'm wired, right? It's
but that's the entire, basically what Ed's trying to say is Ed's trying to integrate a lifestyle into business where you have certain thought patterns and you have a process of thinking and you approach life a certain way, and you should be integrating that into your business, because if you're wired that way, you need to make bigger decisions than business decisions in order to fix that. Nothing when you're in the office from 7:30 till 5:30 is going to fix that. There's way bigger issues in your life that need to get sorted out, and the way that you think and the way that you react and the way that every part of your life plays into your daily it's basically just like that's who you are, and you need to kind of restructure that in order to have a more successful business approach and everything else. I don't think that they're always so isolated and independent of one another.
Nick, or even Tyler, you guys, is there a point where you have the throttle down and you're hammering away at all the details and everything? And I'm always, at the same time I'm doing that, I'm always trying to lift my head up like it's a submarine and try and just look around and be like, is this the point of no return where either I'm going to keep hammering away with all our guys and it's not going to get done still? And this is where I need to raise my hand. I do it with my guys all the time. I'm like, I do it on purpose because I want them to almost sense it. There's a sense that you have to have when you're in the project and go, I literally stand there and I raise my hand, and John's like, what are you doing? I'm like, this is the exact point where we need to say, we can't execute. If we're going to keep that time frame, I can't execute to that level. And this is when I need to raise my hand and go, I know it was an hour ago, it wasn't there, but right now we're there where this is not going to happen. And I've tried to relay that because sometimes I think it's easier to teach it to guys than it is to actually implement it yourself on a project. Mm-hmm. And I like that, it's really tough because it's like you get into it and that snowball, and then it gets heavier and you're like, I'm just committing to this, and pride gets involved. And
right.
It's really where I'm like, you know what?
And you do way more damage that way.
Way more damage. And it's really understand that you have And I think a client, if it's not, because Nick, at the end of the project, Tyler, you have clients living there, but like the closer you get to the finish line, the ramp up of stress isn't just because of you. It's like you get the text, I got movers scheduled, and they can't move, and you're like, they're movers, aren't they supposed to be able to move, like schedules and dates? And then it's like you use that to diffuse it, and then it's like, oh no, well I got my mortgage is locked in, I got this interest rate, and it's like, dude, why are you piling all that on me? Like, do you want magic? Like, do you want this to be amazing, or do you want me to throw it all out the window, hit this time frame because your mortgage guy said, he's going to save you, 0.005 on your interest rate? Like, is that really what you value when you're in the house every day?
And it is. It's like, you're absolutely right. It's the end where it's not just you that is compounding. It's all of these things compounding into like this one final push, and even someone moving in and movers are locked in. It's like, it's still not life or death. Hey, sorry, you want the house executed at this level, or do you want it completed by this date? One of them has to suffer.
You're going to live with this execution for the next 15 years. So
if you got to rent, if you got to stay with your parents, or get a motel, or find a short, like Airbnb, whatever, like there's a solution to all of that. I'm sitting here like working through these scenarios in my head.
No, same way, because it's
Ed's
so
over
much
there just calm as a cucumber, and I'm over here stressed out.
Hey, I got it, John. I found in my book. You guys can see I have my book here. So this is my
reading while we're talking.
This is my quote to you in answer to your client who didn't like her Le Cornu. It says, "You are never responsible for the actions of others. You are only responsible for you. When you truly understand this and refuse to take things personally, you can hardly be hurt by the comments or actions of others, such as the lady who cried when she didn't like the color of the Le Cornu oven."
Well, we gutted the entire kitchen, but
how do we get? How did you? Okay.
My thing was at that moment, Ed, because on my projects, a lot of times you don't exist. So for me to be able to fix that situation, I had to make the hard decision and tell that client who had a 10-year plus relationship with that designer, it's time to move on, and we're going to find you somebody new. So, because I wrote this down because we kind of went down a rabbit hole, but like as the GC, we're the general contractor. We're still the tallest guy in that totem pole, as Nick said, the leader. So we do have control over that. So if that happened and no one else stepped in, then I can't trust that system. I can't trust the client and the decision making. I can't trust the designer and what they did. So I have to then compile a team, whether it's the architect, bring in a cabinet designer just for kitchens, and then bring in a designer for the overall aesthetics. So that was my next move. I didn't just go, oh my God, what do I do? And take it totally personal. It's like, how do I solve this? And that's where the personal part came in, is that, if I just said, hey, this is on them, this is their person, which I think a lot of people can do, then it's not on me. We'll just build it again. It's job security. But I did take it personal, and I made that call. I remember I hated it because it was a phone call, because I couldn't get the client because they weren't actually in the state at that moment, when I was like, you know what? We have to change everything. We have to throw everybody out the window. Nick, you were at this job. This is the big one. And it was like, that was a huge change for them, because they had so much committed to that person, like from lighting. And I think that's really, like, when I say lighting, hundreds of thousands of dollars of lighting that was designed, where now it was like, now you second guess everything that designer touched, tile, the whole 9 yards. That costs hundreds of thousands of dollars to do. So I guess now I don't know how to do what you said, because the more I try to explain this in the situation, the more I feel like I'm accountable for everything. Like, that's what I keep trying to ask Ed, and like, it's probably, you probably don't have the answer. You're there. You've taken these steps in your life to get to a position where you have accepted the fact that you can only control that, and that you truly believe that. And I do. I'm envious of it, and I'm curious at what, how you really got there. Like, what was it? The 10-day meditation retreat? Is it CBD?
Because I'll go on one.
So so John, I see that what you did was you came from a place of caring and compassion, which is like, that's the cornerstone of Zen, is compassion. And that's, but you came from that place. That doesn't mean you took it personal. I mean, taking it personal means that you feel like it's your fault and you're beating yourself up. But if you came from that place, as opposed to, look, my client, I mean, she spent all this money and she hates the house. I don't want her to feel like that. I want to help her out. So, I mean, I guess the end result is the same, but you have to look at where that motivation came from. Did it come from this place of compassion and caring, or did it come from this place of guilt? And, you mentioned pride. I don't think you can have pride unless you take something personal. So I'm not convinced that pride is always a good thing, I mean, we talk about pride of craftsmanship and pride of work, but I think pride sometimes can be a double-edged sword. And I think sometimes it creates, can create those issues that we're talking about here when taking things personally.
Well, the saying is, pride getting in the way.
Yeah, right.
I just feel like I'm. How old are you, Ed?
57.
All right, so I got 17 more years before I can call myself like I'm Zen and I can deal with it. So
the other thing I want to cover too is the other thing about taking things personal is to realize that that's what creates conflict in most of our situations. So one of the key things I talk about is reducing conflict in construction projects, right? That's one of the biggest things we have in construction projects, is conflict, right? So listen to this quote. When you take things personally, then you feel offended. And your reaction is to defend your beliefs. And that's what creates conflict. So you make something big out of something so little because of your need to be right and to make everyone else wrong. So if you want to reduce conflict in your construction projects, try not to take anything personal.
It's really hard.
Yeah,
it's very hard. I mean, that's why I talk about. I mean, this book is whatever, 110 pages. You can read it in a night, and it takes a lifetime to practice. These are very simple, but they're not easy.
Yeah, I think the most difficult part of not taking things personally is anything that you were very passionate about, that you pour everything into. It's tough, even if you can basically relinquish yourself of any responsibility for somebody's unhappiness or the issues. It's still tough because you feel there's a certain ownership that you have there, and it's difficult to kind of absolve yourself of that and say, I'm not going to take this personally. I did the best that I can, because the whole reason you're there in the first place is because you care and you're passionate and you want the best for your customers. So it's a tough, I think that integrating that again is more of a lifestyle than just saying, I'm not going to take this personally. It's way more complex than that.
Yeah.
100%. I think I'm the only thing that's making me feel more comfortable with taking things personal is that I know if I'm going to build something with my heart and soul and give a dwelling like a soul to it, it's going to have a personality, then it's going to come along with a little bit of this kind of battle I have internally that I'm going to have to deal with that. That's kind of the fun part of it. And I have to look at it as it being fun. If I don't, then I'm in the wrong game. That's if I can make it through and have that stress, and I'm going to work on these little moments where if I can see that window where it's like, all right, that window's closing and I'm not seeing it in the last 3 hours of the job or 3 days or 3 weeks, I'm seeing it at the 3-month marker. Then I'm chalking that up to experience that I'm not just flying by the seat of my pants and hoping this gets done. I'm using technology, my gut, and my team to be able to do it. And it's like we had this talk today with the client. It's like, hey, we're going to be damn close. The reality of it is, you should look for another place for rental. That's kind of the perfect thing. But I know I don't want to take away this trophy of you moving in August, because that's just what that is. It's a trophy. There's no purpose behind it. There's no difference. Your life doesn't change. There's still going to be a site around you that's having work, but you've made it a trophy. And I think that's what I've learned over the years is that we build things up for these little moments that people want to have that trophy and go, no, we did this, we accomplished this. The reality is the accomplishment isn't the goal. The actual goal is you living in something that's amazing, that you're going to live with, and not have me sit in here with my crews for the next month because you needed to hit that date, that we're going to still be in there. Now you've ruined that whole relationship because you're there every day. And it's trying to see that, and I'm coping with it. I don't think I'll ever have it solved, but it's making me feel better about it. But I take things super personal, and not so much the way that you just narrated it with that quote is that I think Matt Sargent, my architect, put it the best, is that we the design is what we're going after. And that's what we're trying to accomplish. And it's not what I think is right, because there's carpenters on our job sites that are more experienced than me on technique. I look at it, I was lucky with an old boss that he always said, hey, what's your approach? And that's how I look at it too. But you still have to have the leadership, meaning I say this to everyone. It's like, if I walked onto every job and said, hey, how do you think you should do it? And then painter's like, well, what about this? I'm like, what do you think you should do? What the hell am I doing? Like, I want to give people a voice, don't get me wrong. But at a certain point, they are looking to you for an answer, and you have to be that person. But I do want to take everything into consideration, and I do want to question things that don't sound right, because I am an advocate for that client or that designer that isn't there, that I want to ask those. So when the client or whoever walks in and goes, hey, why is that cut like that? Well, A, I thought this is best, and B, I ran it by the designer, or C, maybe I didn't do any of the above and I guessed. Like, you get me? Like, you need to have some sort of a rhyme or reason. But if we're going to say in the beginning that, with the passion that, like Tyler said, we pour into it. Like, I was at that client meeting and the architect was like, he pours everything into these projects. Then for me to turn around and go at 9 o'clock or at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I turn my phone off, or something comes up and I go, all right, it's not life or death. Like, you get me? They don't go hand in hand. So it is a really fine line. If I'm going to build with that personality and that passion and that blood, sweat, and tears and soul, then guess what? You're waking up at 3 a.m. most days of the week and on the weekends. I guess I'm not going to be a guy about quantity, where it's like, hey, I'm going to do 100 kitchens this year and make a ton of money. You get me? There are people out there and they make a great living and that's what they love. And they can turn their phone off at 4. My ramble's over.
Yeah.
I agree with you, John, on a lot of points. I think and Ed, I feel like I'm starting to understand it, but that there's a disconnect between, still having a personal touch and everything, but not taking things personal. And more so
sounds like an oxymoron.
I maybe.
I'm not knocking you. I'm just saying.
No, I know, but I think
it doesn't make sense to me.
It's almost more where it's like, when it doesn't go right, you can't take it personal. Where it's like, and Ed, stop me anytime. Like, I feel like when, it's like, hey, really want to, when they are upset about something, it's like trying to remove that from, I just not taking that personal. Like, understood. Like, we, I wish we hit that schedule too, but we didn't, and this is the fact of the matter. And it's like, obviously they're upset, but knowing that there's so many other opportunities in this project for them to be really excited about, and if we sit and focus on the fact that we didn't hit the schedule, everything else is gonna lack attention. All your attention goes into focusing on the fact that you didn't hit schedule, instead of focusing on everything else that can turn out really great.
Well, even on the flip side, like, we have a client that was like, hey, let's hold off on the pool. And I was like, you know what? We'll just permit the pool, and we can figure out. We have the permit in hand, blah, blah. And then we go, it's going to take this amount of time. So months ago, we were doing this whole process. Then now the client goes, hey, why is it going to take so long to finish the hardscape? And to my point is, even if I can't turn to them and go, hey, remember that conversation we had 3 months ago about, the pool permitting, you flip-flopped on the idea, decision-making, and this is what we did. I still have to go, I think this is the right path, and this is where we're at. I can't turn on the client either. You get me? But I do feel better that I brought up those issues, those ideas, those concerns at the time, because now this is the path they went down. But Nick, if I just sat back in that conversation 2 months ago and said, you know what, don't permit the pool. We'll just do what they want to do. I'm not the professional. I'm not the person with the experience that didn't raise their hand at the time. So yeah, if I'm going to be the one leading the ship down this whole process, meaning especially for you, for how much design you put into it, like I'm just looking at all the stuff. You handle all the stuff from the millwork. Like the accountability chain for you, it's around your neck and getting tighter day to day. So like,
Ed,
I will confirm.
Do you? I feel like we're kind of hung up on this like responsibility thing, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's probably a lot more involved than just kind of absolving yourself of that. Like your entire principle behind this and the Zen Builder and everything else, like that's an entire lifestyle that you integrate into every move that you make. And it's not just 1, 2, 3, even in what you're referring to, the 4 agreements, like that's just one part of this entire lifestyle. This is something that you have to adopt and live and breathe in order to kind of integrate into your business, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's an ideal. You know, it's kind of like the North Star. You never get there. You know, it guides your direction, but you never arrive. And so I think it's definitely ideals. I mean, the things we're talking about here, not taking things personally, doing your best. I mean, those are ideals that you really can't achieve all the time. But if you recognize those ideals and at least strive for them, then I think that's really the key. And I fail all the time, right? I still get stressed and, you know, but every morning I'm sitting on my cushion for 30 minutes in my meditation and, you know, trying to kind of reorient myself and take it back. And, you know, the thing too, Nick, when you were saying, you know, well, it's just about not taking it personally when things go wrong. I think it's not taking it personally when things go right as well, because you can't really have it both ways. You know, if you're not going to take it personal, you can't take it personal when they go right or when they go wrong. It's kind of, you can't really turn that switch off. And so I think to your point, Tyler, that's where you have to really see it as this all encompassing, you know, part of your life. And it's not something you just, you know, a tool you pull out and you use it. Oh, today, okay, this has happened, so now I'm not going to take it personally. Like you really got to work on not taking anything personally.
Yeah, I feel like you're kind of manipulating something to work to your advantage, where when it's convenient for you to kind of adopt this ideal, yeah, it's great. But then when it's not convenient for you, then you throw it out the window. And then I think that's not actually living the lifestyle.
Right. That's when it doesn't work, right? When you try to just kind of use this as a tool that you're going to pull out when you need it. No, like, you know, the first one, be impeccable with your word. I mean, that's pretty crazy strong. That's like impossible. You know, I don't know anyone who's impeccable with their word. So, but again, you can't, you know, you don't do that occasionally. You do that, you know, as much as you can. And it's something you constantly strive to.
Do you think there was an evolution of your experience that this burden, it grows to a point and then it kind of settles down? Meaning, I remember when I was a builder and I was younger and I was a carpenter, and you know, you kind of went through your motions and did your work, and then I had like kids, and I was like, holy crap, none of these job sites are safe, like to a whole different level. Like my eyes were open to, like I had these little buffers on, like blinders, and then I was like, wow, like what am I doing? And then like I listened to people where I did a comment years ago on my story, and I was like, is it weird that every time the phone rings, I freak out? Like my mind, whoever's calling me, while it's ringing, I'm like thinking of the 4 things that possibly could be going wrong. It's not like, oh dude, can't wait to talk to Jimmy. It's so that way when even if it's a client, whatever it is, I've set myself up for the negative. Like whenever a client goes, hey, everything's going great, and I'm like, just tell me the but. I'll just start with the but, and then you can follow up with the amazing stuff. So, but people were like, it's not like that. I'm like, you know what? When I was 5 years in, it wasn't like that. When I was 10 years in, it wasn't like that. Today, it's like that, because I've seen houses catch on fire. I've seen people get hurt. I've seen all those things. So it's opened my eyes. It's like your kids when they're running around for the first time. Every table, every corner of a couch, every single thing looks like an absolute nightmare. And I think that comes with experience. I guess my long-winded question is, you've been doing it so long. Do you get over that? Like my second kid, dude, let the kid run wild. I'm not wrapping the kid with pillows. He's going to be fine.
It's funny because I think obviously you have to be pretty spiritual to have this outlook and this mindset and kind of devote a large portion of your life to kind of practicing what you preach. And I don't think that that's very common in our industry. I think that everyone's so busy and so crazy where it's like, I'm not going to wake up and take time for myself or practice these principles on a daily basis, where so many of us could actually benefit from adopting some sort of lifestyle or spirituality in that sense. And that's not necessarily religion, but I think that kind of looking towards your core beliefs and your values and even just habits in general, that would definitely be beneficial to our lives and our businesses, especially with how much stress we deal with, the timelines, the deadlines, the budget schedules, and then all of the personalities.
Yeah, exactly, Tyler. And while it's construction, I don't think it's unique to construction, right? There are a lot of really stressful jobs out there. And, the people that I've met at the various retreats and gatherings that I've had with Thich Nhat Hanh and at the Deer Park Monastery come from, very stressful jobs, emergency room doctors or, just a lot of different, and they're trying to find a way to manage that stress, to find a way to be able to handle those challenges and responsibilities. And it's, I think, part of the modern world. It's just, people, I talked to this with my dad. I'm like, God, you just don't even know what it's like, Dad. You used to you get the mail once a day and you could read it, and then that was it. I said, I'm getting mail every minute, and they expect a response immediately. That's the thing nowadays, right? Everyone expects a response so immediately that I think that's just increased our stress levels because of that.
That's a great point. So I feel like when we talk about efficiency, people talk about their email process. So what's your tactic with it?
Yeah, good question. So I never send an email after 6 o'clock at night. I write a lot of emails after 6 o'clock at night, but I never send them unless it's to a friend or someone. But to a client, never send it after 6 o'clock at night. And the reason is because a couple of reasons. One is I don't want them to know that I work at night. I don't want them to be responding to me at night. And two, I think you get their attention better in the morning. So I'll write a whole bunch of emails at night, and then I'll either, put them in a delayed send and send them out in the morning, especially like if the client's East Coast and I don't want to get up at, 5 in the morning or 3 in the morning. So I'll just send it out at, if I know they're an early riser, maybe they're up at 5 or 6, I'll send it out at, 3 in the morning here or 2 in the morning. And so it's the first thing they see in that morning in their inbox. And I think people are just fresher, their minds are better. You send it that night before, even if they haven't seen it, then they're kind of like, oh shit, I can't believe this is, I've had this since last night or whatever. And so that's what I do. I write all my emails, lots of them at night, but I only send emails between like 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. And it's the same thing with text messages, and I tell my clients, look, this is not life and death. We're not doing surgery here. And I've got a life and I've got a family, and I know you do too, and I'm going to respect you and you respect me. Now, they can send me an email, and I might even craft my reply that night if I'm sitting on my computer working, but I never send it.
What about an emergency situation? What if
if it's an emergency, but and if it's a client that is overseas, or I know it's going to be hard to get a hold of them, then I'll say let's set up a.
So it's case by case.
You ever gotten an email that somebody's house was on fire?
Well, I mean, they should be calling the fire department, not me, right?
My house is on fire. I'm going to send Ed an email.
Ed, my house is on fire. What do I do? Can you call the fire department?
We're going to have to wait till the morning.
All right. And it goes back to what John said, too. It's all about setting expectations. I mean, that's the first thing that you have to do with your clients is set expectations. And you set expectations by telling them that it's a prototype you're building. You set expectations by telling them it's not life and death. You set expectations. Another thing we really haven't talked about is this whole emotional component. You know, one of my coaching colleagues in our coaching business is named David Lutberger. He wrote this book called Managing the Emotional Homeowner. I don't know if any of you guys are familiar with it, but it is just a great, great book about all of the emotions that a homeowner goes through.
I feel like that's a great book that everyone should be reading.
Right? Yeah, it is. And I love there's a chart in there. I could send it to you guys later. But anyway, there's a chart, and it's the emotional roller coaster, the homeowner's emotional roller coaster. And it goes through and actually charts kind of where their emotions are going to be at certain times. So like, you know, as they're going through the planning stage, it starts really high.
John literally drafted this up. You've got to have it sitting on your desk right there. He drew this in, like, basically explaining the process in which it takes to build a home. I'm not gonna spoil it. John, you can explain it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So at the bottom of it, it's going to go in our, like, right in the website. Nick and I have talked about it. Is the process is really tough to explain. You know, like to get that brief overview, but yet people feel confident with what you're thinking. Meaning, you want to get in their head. So when they're like, what their questions are, they're like, oh, that's the answer to that. So I wrote a kind of a timeline for the project that you could then scroll over, and it would give you different like things that are going to happen throughout that process. And at the bottom of it, I put this red line that would go from red to blue. That would be your stress level throughout the project. Meaning, blue would be pretty cool, everything's calm. These are the areas that you're gonna get stressed out, and these are why. And so it would be along the whole bottom of the timeline. So you're saying this, and I'm like, that would be a good book. And then you said that, I'm like, oh my God, I just sent it to the boys like last week.
That book, right?
That's it.
It's a $76 paperback.
Wow.
Hot tip to the podcast listeners here.
Guys, there's one left on Amazon.
You can get this book for free if you log on to our website. So yeah.
All right, how do I cancel a purchase I just made on Amazon?
Hey, Nick, can you let me screen share, and I'll show you this chart. We can put it down for our listeners here.
Yeah, for sure.
Where are we? There we go.
Oops. Hold on.
I think it's this new high security Zoom thing. Yeah. You got to make me the presenter.
Yeah, I know.
This is when it happens. This is what it's called, Zoom bombing.
Dude, first time someone's taken control of Zoom. This is awesome.
I just gave him screen sharing capabilities.
I'm excited right now. I'm excited to see what we're going to
I know, and I feel I feel like we're on a Rogan podcast when they're looking at the screen. And everyone's like, you know.
I literally started watching his YouTube because they show what he's seeing.
Yeah, I know. It's like now I gotta go watch this. It's like
Nick, it's still not letting me. It says host has disabled participant scrend share.
Did I really?
Nick has a control issue.
Just send it to me. I'll. Hold on. Oh, there we go. Who can?
That was awesome. Just send it to me.
There we go. Okay.
All right. What are we looking at here?
The homeowner's emotional roller coaster. So see, this is it's a little like yours was more linear, John. I don't know if that's like the way you think, but this one's more like the roller coaster, right? So you see they're like at 100% when design starts, right? And then they kind of starts to go down, and they get really excited when they go to working drawings. And then by the time they get to the contract, their mood level is super low. And then the minute they start demo, shoots back up to 100%. And through demo and rough framing and roof deck and windows, like everything's great. And then what happens is you start that process of rough in that takes like months, right? Mm-hmm. And the problem is during the framing stage, they get so excited because every day they show up and there's like a new room built. Mm-hmm. And they're like, God, this is incredible. Like on Monday, we just had the living room, and now we got the bedrooms, and tomorrow's the kitchen. Like, we're going to have this house done, and like, it's a room a day, you know? So they get used to that pacing during the framing stage. But then when you start rough end and you're doing plumbing and electrical and heating, you know, for weeks it goes by, and you're like, I don't get it. I just came last week. You guys have done nothing. Nothing's changed. You haven't built a thing. So by the time you start hanging the drywall, they're just totally discouraged. Oh my God, this thing is going to take forever. Nothing's happened in the last month. And then you start hanging the drywall, they get excited. They're like, wow, I can start to feel these spaces. And then you start, taping and texturing and sanding, and the place becomes a mess. And once again, they keep showing up every Friday and nothing's changed. It's like, I don't get it. There's just dust everywhere. So that's the worst part. That's what we think is really the lowest part, is at the end of drywall sanding.
Glad we plastered.
Because there's no finishes, nothing's going on. And then you start with all the fun stuff, the sexy stuff, the trim, the tile, the painting. And then, of course, once again, they get so excited. They're like, oh, God, the house is done. We're going to throw a party. And you're like, no. We got to do all the finished stuff. We got to do punch lists. And it's another month, and then they get so disappointed. And then finally the thing's done. But, I've had contractors who will actually send their clients like a bottle of wine in drywall sanding when they're done. And just like, hey, just wanted to send you something, and just, wanted to let you know we've got through the roughest part. Now the fun starts. Now we're going to start with all these great finishes that I made you select a year ago.
Yeah. Nick sends a case.
Yeah.
Yeah, send a case.
Well, I guess the only thing I have that's different than this one is, I know it's emotional, but I think it's also anxiety. Like you just noted that a lot of times people make selections ahead of time. When they start seeing these selections that they made even 3 months prior, all that, like all the tile arrives, all the trim arrives, all the cabinetry arrives, and then you're doing paint colors, that's a super, super anxious moment. And here it shows it as like they're back interested again. Mm-hmm. They might be interested on my timeline, in my schedule. It was more of like, this is where your anxiety is going to build up. So be prepared for it, meaning all the bills will start coming in, but then all the stuff you picked months prior actually show up, and you get this second guessing that happens. So that's what I'm putting in mine, is that it's those little moments where people are like, wait a minute, like the outside, how do I pick that exterior color? Like, this is things that will make us anxious, but this is more of like, hey, where do you see the most productivity? And like you tell people, it's like, you get excited when you see the house go up. Then it's the same drive up for the next 3 months because it's all interior. It's all, as I put it, it's the veins and the
arteries.
The arteries. No, it's also
arteries.
Like, all these little things that kind of.
I think that a lot of the questions and anxiety comes at finish stage because that's the language that the homeowners can speak. They don't understand the rough framing. They don't understand the mechanicals, the rough ends, all of that stuff. And I think once they start seeing finishes, trim, doors, cabinetry, tile, that's something, while they may not understand it, they can actually see it. And then they start thinking, is this going to go well with this light fixture? Is this going to work with the countertops that we selected? And I think that's where a lot of that anxiety comes from. You're now at a stage of the project that your customers can speak and see that language and understand it some.
Yeah, but it's also the fact that what you can change it in the frame stage costs very little.
Yeah.
But once they realize that they don't like it at the finish stage, it gets the fuse is so much, it's been lit for 6 months. So now it's like, oh boy. So it's really like, my guys know I'm not really looking for them. I'm looking for what their eye looks at a little too long when they walk in the house. Like that's how I'm reading them, is like, what do I need to fix? And I go stand at their exact spot when they walked in, where they stare at for an extra 3 seconds. Like, what are they looking at? That's what they're concerned about, but they don't know how to say it. They don't know how to verbalize it. They just don't know what feels right, and they don't know how to say it. So it's finding how you get there for them.
And Tyler, I think you bring up a really good point too, which is that even if they pick the selections out months before, once they actually see it in a house and they see the color combinations together, and they're like, oh wow, I didn't realize. I saw cut sheets and it all looked great on my designer's color board, but now that I see it in real person, it's stressful for them because they can't.
they start second guessing every decision that they made at that point, and it's oftentimes it's halfway through that process or the quarter of the way through that where the entire room hasn't come together and they're questioning the tile selection without the paint color. And it's just like, just wait until it's all done and it'll come together. And if you don't like it at that point, we'll address it. But addressing it at every single stage up into that point doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
That's why it's tough for a TV show. Like they get to make a selection and they come at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's, I think there's two things that have really caused our jobs to be much harder in these last 10, 15 years. One of them is Google and the whole internet thing. The other one is television, whether it's, HGTV or just, this persona of the dishonest contractor, Have you guys ever seen the show? It's not on anymore, but Adam Carolla, right? The comedian. So he did a show called what was it called? Catch a Contractor. And so it was basically like, it was a kind of a comedy show, but he would get a contractor that had walked off the job, and he would like set up a sting to get them back, to finish up, and they'd be like half done kitchens. And then he'd get them to come back, and then he'd turn the lights on and like embarrass them and get them to like finish the job. And it was just the craziest show. I mean, it was good for entertainment, but it just was propagated. In one of my talks, I show the casting call that he has, and it's something like, got screwed, were you taken by that, that terrible dishonest contractor? Well, we'll make that SOB pay, we'll set up a sting and we'll make him make it right. And it's just the kind of thing that like you'd watch one episode and you never want to hire a contractor ever again. You'd just be like, they're all contractors
Catch a
are
Predator.
crooks.
Which is like one of the worst shows I've ever seen.
Yeah.
I forgot about that.
And what I tell my crowd is I say, and maybe as an owner's rep, but even as a business coach, I've had way more instances of dishonest homeowners than I have of dishonest contractors, whether it's homeowners that don't want to pay their last payment or, just a lot. I think I've had many more issues with dishonest homeowners than dishonest contractors, but that doesn't make a good story, right? There was a bunch of Citibank commercials, the ones where they did them where it's like, why don't you just say what you really mean? And like the contractor sitting there, and he's like, oh, okay, so we're going to take out this load bearing wall. It's going to totally double the cost of your job. It's going to take twice as long, but that's fine because I'll make more money on it anyway. And the wife is like, oh, that's great. Okay, well, I can't wait to start, and I'm going to watch and question your every move. And it's just one of those where it's just this complete lack of trust. And that's the problem, is that I think when we go into a meeting and you realize that if they've watched one of these shows or they've seen these advertisements, they're just coming from a place where you're already, they don't trust you. So you like have to work extra hard to build their trust because they already think that you're some dishonest, corrupt contractor.
Do you think this is what leads, we've danced around it a couple times, but let's get into what you do with coaching. Is this what leads you or leads these contractors to reaching out, is that they're having issues with homeowners? Or do you think it's coming from a different side of the business?
Sometimes it's about homeowners, but I would say, most of our business coaching is clients that they're great builders and they know how to build, but they don't know how to manage their business and they don't know how to manage their clients. So, yeah.
So what?
And I think.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think that managing the business is probably a bigger factor than managing the clients, but we definitely do deal with both of those in our coaching practice.
You say we. Who is we?
So we is myself and my two partners, which is David Lupberger, the guy we just talked about that wrote Managing the Emotional Homeowner, and a guy named Paul Sanneman, who was actually kind of an interesting story. So back when I hired my life coach, I actually about 6 months later got approached by a business coach, and that business coach was Paul Sanneman. So Paul was really instrumental in guiding me through my whole, he helped me kind of build the whole Zen Builder thing and develop my public speaking and my consulting business. And so then we started coaching together. And then about a year ago, we formed this residential contractor services group. David joined our group. And so there's the three of us. And it's really great because Paul's been doing this for like 35 years. He's never run a construction business, but he's just a really smart guy, just really understands contractors. And that's all he's done for 30 years is exclusively coach contractors. And then you've got David, who comes from 25 years as a remodeler and developed all these great programs and wrote the Emotional Homeowners book and all that. And then they have me, who's the kind of the more of the homeowner liaison guy. And then I'm also kind of the tech guy because I'm at 57, I'm the youngest of the team by 10 to 15 years. So I'm kind of the guy that's more into I was the early adopter of the cloud-based systems and all that kind of stuff. So so the three of us work together as coaches, and it's a great, really complementary team that we work together.
So you say it's primarily based around business, like the structure of your business. So what specifically are you helping put together SOPs, or are you just really helping? Well, I guess, that would be my question.
Yeah. So, again, it's kind of like my owner's rep business. Every client is different. And so, some people need help with SOPs. That's really David's expertise. It just depends. I'll tell you, though, a couple of things. I think there's three main mistakes that we find that most of our clients make. And the first one is that they're not marketing all the time, and they don't recognize that they really are like Nike. Nike's a marketing company that sells shoes to support their marketing. And we tell our contractor clients, it's really the same thing. You are a marketing company, not a building company. You're a marketing company. You have to market in order to do what you love to do, which is building.
Agreed.
And then the second mistake that most contractors make is that they're not always hiring. And this is something that you're really being magnified now during
Nick's like check.
Can I get a big check?
Nick's like, can we have you on next? Can we have you on next week?
Well,
so can you hire too much?
Hold on, before you go on to number two, you're not hiring too much. Elaborate on that, or you're not hiring enough.
Right. So what we say is it's like you should treat your construction company like a football team. And what we mean by that is that you have different, a football team doesn't just have one quarterback, right? They've got a first string quarterback, second string quarterback, third string quarterback. So you should always be looking for project managers. And you have your top, best project managers, you have your junior project managers, and you should just always be running an ad, always keeping an ad, you should just on your website have opportunities available, and your key top 2 or 3 positions, you should just always have them available, always be looking for people, because you just never, right now is the best time to hire in construction. We actually have a recruiting service as part of our coaching business. And I just got off the phone with our head recruiter before we got on this call, and it's incredible the talent that he's finding, because people are industry jumping right now. They might have been in hospitality, or they were in entertainment, and they're like, hey, my job is not coming back for the next year or two. I want to be in a business where I see some future. And so what's everyone doing? Everyone's stuck at home. Everyone's like, well, God, everyone's going to be at home for, whoever knows how long. I'm going to go into the home industry. So, we're seeing really experienced guys that have great project management from, maybe they've run a hotel, or they've done something, in transportation or whatever, but they don't have the construction experience, but they know how to manage people, or they know how to manage projects. And we're finding really great people. And the same thing too really applies to subcontractors, right? All of your major trades, I'm sure, or I hope that all you guys do this. You don't just have one electrician, right? You got your main electrician, you got your secondary electrician. You probably should even have a third one, just in case. You never know when you need that. But and The other mistake that I think contractors make, which is really funny, is like, if you're not, Nick, I don't know how good your electrical skills are, but my guess is that you have an electrician that you would use, right? You would not hire an electrician. I mean, you wouldn't try to do it yourself.
No.
Okay.
Not on a client's home.
But, right. But my guess is that if you needed to hire someone, you'd probably go, oh, I can do this, right? We're going to run the ad on Indeed or Monster, or
you get 3 quotes.
To do it yourself. Yeah, get 3 quotes. No, but that's we tell our clients, we're like, hey, you're smart enough to know that you can't build this yourself. You go out and hire the best people you can as subcontractors. Why wouldn't you hire someone to do your recruiting? Why do you think you should be able to know how to do recruiting and find your best people? That's not your skill set. You should hire someone to do that.
Was that number 3?
No, number 3 is, so number 1 was that, right, they're not marketing all the time, and we could do a whole podcast on that.
Yeah.
2 is the recruiting. 3rd thing is they don't adopt technology fast enough. Very slow. Contractors as a whole are really slow to adopt technology. Now, I'm guessing that that's not probably the case with at least some, if not all of you, but Paul tells a story, 25 years ago when he tried to get people to bring cell phones to the job, and they're like, oh no, that just interrupts the flow. I don't need a cell phone, or emails. I remember when I first showed up at a job with a Trio. Are you old enough? You guys are old enough to remember?
I had one.
Right. Yeah. And that same guy, the guy that I told you about at the beginning, that was like, I don't know what the hell you're doing here. I show up at this Trio. I'm like, hey, Brian, look at this. I don't have to go back to my office. I can read emails and answer my client now right from the job site. He's like, why the hell would you want to do that? That just interrupts your day. Just screw that. Just write to them at night. I mean, come on. If you had to mail a letter, they wouldn't get it for 3 days. So yeah, they're just very slow. And I think nowadays the slow adoption is really with cloud-based construction management systems. I'm curious, you guys, if you're out there, what percentage of your competitors would you say are using cloud-based construction management systems?
Less than 20%? I don't know.
I would have no idea.
That's a total guess. I don't know, but based on what conversations I've had with other clients or prospective clients, there's been multiple conversations where it's like, oh yeah, they you're the only one that's ever even mentioned something like that. Right. So.
And when I talked to Dan Houghton, right, or Donnie Wyatt from Co-Construct, and asked those guys, and I think they're thinking the adoption rate is around 15, maybe 15 or 20%.
Wow.
So if you think about that, what an incredible competitive advantage that you have if you're going and making. And again, back to what Tyler was saying, how you don't want to compete on price, you want to compete on something else. Imagine what kind of competitive advantage you have if you show up for a new client meeting and you bring your iPad, your tablet, and you're like, yeah, we use Buildertrend. It's all based on the cloud. Here's what your construction schedules are going to look like. Here's what your budgets and just that in and of itself can be enough to separate yourself from your competition.
I would agree with that. And I think the marketing thing is huge. And it's, I work with a coach, and we recently had a conversation about sales and marketing, and he stopped me and corrected me and said it's marketing and sales. Marketing comes first, sales comes second. But it's funny because we started doing it kind of looking at past, when we were marketing or when we were looking to or in sales mode, and it was an up and down chart, and it's like, hey, I need jobs, let's go market, and then get sales, and then stop. It's like, and I think about it recently, it's like, we have a tremendous amount of work, for the next year at this point, and I see myself scaling back on the sales, but it's like, why, or I'm sorry, on the marketing, it's like, and I'm thinking to myself, I actually don't want to be scaling back. I want to be focused on it so I can then start building out the next year and the next year. Because, one of my goals for my business is to be booked 24 to 36 months out and be working on projects, for 12 plus months. And, it's very, I don't know the reason for it, I guess, but I would agree with you that is for me is definitely a huge issue, is that I see that marketing in general, is something that a lot of us mess up.
Yeah. And it's I mean, already look, construction is inherently cyclical because our clients are never long-term clients. Other businesses, you can have a client for 5 years, 10 years. But I mean, if you have a client for 5 or 10 years, you're either doing something wrong or, they're the people that are buying a new house every couple of years, which is great, but there's not a lot of those out there. So inherently we're always working to replace ourselves, right? We're always working to complete the projects. And so it's a cyclical kind of, there's a cyclical nature to our business. And if we try to respond to that cyclicalness by turning our marketing off and on, it just magnifies that and makes those ups and downs, those sine waves, even steeper. So the only way you try to flatten those sine waves is by doing a consistent marketing, building it up and continuing. It's just like Coke. I mean, does Coke need to market? No, but they do, right? I mean, Coke never stops marketing. It's not because they're trying to sell more soda water. I mean, it's just, that's what they know, that's what they do. They have to always be marketing and developing that brand and that image. So
Nick,
and construction companies are no different.
Nick, what's the comfort level by being booked out that far? Like, what are you trying to get? Like, I found that sometimes the bigger jobs aren't the more profitable ones, but they give you security that you needed. What's the goal behind being booked for that far out?
Spending more time on planning, and I've said it all along, is I like that process. I like all the preparation, the thinking through, the thoroughness, and spending that time. I mean, we have a project that we just signed on that we're going to spend 10 to 12 months designing and planning on it before we start construction. And I'm really excited about that. Beyond that, it is a little bit about the security to be able to book that far out and spread our projects out a little bit further, take on longer length projects. So, rather than trying to make 10 sales a year, I'm trying to make, maybe 5. So I'm spending ultimately less time on trying to get new leads or new sales, and more time in, on the business, on what we're doing, being there to support the team and the execution and things like that. Good or bad answer?
And
I feel like
I would say, as a business coach, Nick, I think you have to do that. I mean, that's the key thing, is that all of our clients struggle with working on their business instead of in their business, right?
And I genuinely enjoy working on the business. There's a lot of things in the business that I really don't enjoy that I still do, despite how many people I've hired. It's, there's still things that I do every day. It's like, I don't want to be doing this, but I need to. And, ultimately I would love to be strictly working on the business, and then being involved with the day-to-day from the sense of being on the job site, communicating with the guys, seeing how things are being done, offering my opinion and my advice on things, being creative. That's what I am. I'm a creative. And when we run into tricky situations, that's one thing I know I'm good at, is I can work through and come up with a solution really quickly. And maybe it's wildly creative or really simple. It doesn't matter. I can help move that along really quick. So ultimately, like, for me personally, that's what I want to be doing, is focusing on that and on the business, not the day-to-day running, anything to do with the financial side of it. I want to be involved with it and see the report, but I don't want to be doing any data entry. I don't want to be doing takeoffs and estimating and things like that, but I am.
But how does that? Yeah, I don't see how the pipeline. I don't see how the pipeline, like you having a longer pipeline, changes that.
Oh, I don't think I was trying to relate those two.
It's just two different goals. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because now Nick has about 1 million goals. I just think that, you know, having a pipeline that's full can create its own issues that they're not, like having this, the issues you're having right now, like I've said it to you since I met you, is hire a GM. Mm-hmm. Like find someone that's seasoned that can do that stuff, that can help structure your day-to-day stuff so you can be that inventive energy guy. Yeah. That clients love about you, your subs and your employees. It's being able, you always have to focus on the business. I've said it to 100 people. Every time someone goes to me, he goes, oh, you know, I'm booked for like 2 years. And it's like, you could be out of business in 12. Right. It means nothing. The security you get from signing these contracts and them, you taking a deposit and then telling you in 12 months, hey, you know what? I found someone that's available, that you've given me the time to go look for somebody else. Mm-hmm. And that's all gone. And it's just like, no, you have to then play the long game. Mm-hmm. That's all I ever say is the long game. It's always have the fundamentals and the execution. And the hardest part, Ed, about what you said about like subs and all that, like I have this thing about telling people that have had guys for 15, 20 years. Like there's something to be said about that. You know, they may have had guys come and go in their crews, but yet I've always stuck with them, good or bad. The execution's the same, and it's the same faces. They know, you know, we speak construction, and they're part of my family. And I do take that probably too serious, you know, and I have a hard time. I give them the benefit of the doubt, let them grow with me, or, you know, shrink, or however it's going to be, and then use them as, you know, they may have been a bigger crew, and then I shrink them down because who they have is really good at certain things. Maybe they now become my stair guy when they used to be my full trim crew. You know, so I guess I think what's missing from this industry is loyalty, from both the consumer end of it and from the GC end of it. And even our subs, is that, you know, I've joked about this in a big project we had. We bid out the project, and it was, you know, they bid it and it was 80 cents a square foot for plaster. And by the time that project came around, the plaster, the market changed. They could have gotten $1.30 a square foot. So I got a third of their crew because guess what? That's what the market gave me at that time. So when you talk about early on, the options of like that same meeting I had last week, in the bid sheet, it was like, hey, you have 3 options for a contract. You have GMP, guaranteed maximum price. You have cost plus, and then you have cost plus with like a fixed fee and stuff like that. And it's like, every client wants a GMP because they just feel like the security that comes along with that locked in number, even though they don't realize the reality of it is when things go up and down, whether it's cedar or this plaster, you have to then, you know, liquidate or dilute the quality somewhere else to get the numbers to even off. So like I said at that meeting, without hesitation, Nick, even though you asked me something earlier and I boggled it, it was like, no, it's cost plus. And if you want to have some security, I'm happy to fix my fee. So that way you don't feel like I'm incentivized to add something or do this change or whatever it is. And that change order might have management in it because we're handling more of it. But that's a one case, you know, item, meaning we'll take it case by case. And the architect totally jumped in and said, that's the right way. I don't want to make the overall product suffer because a tariff went on Canada for cedar. And now the whole outside of this house is designed for cedar in the roof. And then where do we get it from? Where do we steal it from? The quality of the hardwood floor, and I try and, you know, sneak in a character grade for the hardwood flooring. Yeah, that's what's going to happen. And that's what we talk about it here, because I know I have clients that listen to this. And some are future clients that we have a deal signed with them that we haven't done. It's always like, what did I say? But it's the reality of it is that, you know, to be transparent is to say these things. And that's when you're at the meeting and there's a guy before you and a guy to follow you. Your impact that you leave behind is these things that no one else has said, but it's reality. If I could drop my mic, it's attached to a stand, but I can't.
And I think, let me go back to what you were saying, Nick. And I like, if it was our client and they said we had a 2-year backlog, I would tell them you either need to raise your prices or increase the size of your crew. Like, I don't think that's like necessarily a good goal to have 2 years of backlog.
Yeah, think about it, Nick. 2 years ago, if you were charging what you were charging then, now.
Yeah.
Like, what would that mean?
I guess it's not so much the time frame. I think it's more my want to spend more time in design and thinking things through. It's so incredibly frustrating. That's what I'm most frustrated with in our projects, is that we go into these things and we're still figuring things out. And oftentimes it gets into this rip it out mentality where I'm ending up paying for it because it wasn't thought out to a manner that netted a result that I was happy with.
Well, here's the thing, Nick. Whenever Tyler talks, I think it applies directly to me. He said something earlier. I forget what it was, but I literally looked up like he was talking to me. Mm-hmm. But like, do you feel like I think Tyler can do that mentality. Tyler can go into something where it's not 100% vetted out because he's controlling all of it. And as he says, he's giving 100% to that client. So for you and me, how do we take on this creative approach that's fun, but then have to then delegate to a team that A, isn't experienced enough, and I'm saying that 100% with my guys, meaning what we do right now with our specs and some of our other products is we take 7 pages of a document and create an amazing home. That's because I'm there every day.
Right.
And it's going to take, let's throw it right, 3 to 7 years for my guys to do what we do right now every day.
John, you and I, we talk about it all the time. It's very hard. It's,
but we say it's the creative part that we love, but then it's like, you know what, if I'm going to build a team and be able to pull away, then I need to then up my game with architects and designers that, like, the drawings I went to on Friday, those were 45 pages, and they came with a 45-page, I mean, Ed, laugh at that. That's like the prelude. It's like the intro to your projects. But like, that was enough that I'm like, dude, this is dynamite. Like, this is what I need. There's no questions. Now I can feel comfortable leaving a superintendent and a PM there where there's no question in execution. Even what was bid from our subs.
Maybe I'm contradicting myself. I don't know.
Well, no, my point is that, like I said earlier, that if I'm going to play with this whole blood, sweat, and tears and heart and soul thing, then I got to deal with the stress. Because I take accountability and I take it personal, that if we want to play the game of creativity, then we need to either change our personnel to be able to accommodate this creativity, meaning have a designer on staff that can then dig into these details, or maybe we should be playing in the creativity bubble. Yeah. This is what I've said to myself.
Mm-hmm. That's fair. Go ahead, Ned.
Well, I was going to respond to your other comment that you said you like to work on your business instead of in your business, And I think, there are a lot of contractors that do that. We always encourage our clients. That's what we do as business coaches is helping them to do that. The reason why so many contractors can't do that, even if they enjoy it, is because of the nature of our business. We are in a crisis management business. Every day, we're putting fires out and we're dealing with crises. And oftentimes we're forced to deal with what's most urgent, but not necessarily what's most important. And so the important things like working on your business get eclipsed by the urgent stuff that you got to deal with that day, but isn't in the long term as important as your long-term planning and business development. And
right, which is why that stuff usually happens at night or the weekends or after hours, and it's like, and it gets your 50% energy into it, and it suffers. Where you're absolutely right. It's day to day. It's answering what my guys are running into, or hey, this is going to hold up the job if I don't get an answer on it. It's like not the end of the world. I have more important things to do, but you know what? I know the answer to it. I might as well answer them, and then that happens 100 times.
I think that so many of the details that you struggle with or your guys struggle with on jobs, Nick, also come down to experience. And that's not to knock anyone, but I think that a lot of those issues, there's opportunity to foresee those issues or at least address them or kind of make that job come together in a way that it's less noticeable. But I think with experience, you have more foresight where, hey, I know that's going to be a pinch point down the road. So a lot of it's learning on the fly right now, which stinks for you, especially at the scale at which you're growing. So that's the decision where it's like, do we bring somebody in with more experience and then we're breaking bad habits, or do we just let this play out and hope that people stay on board and gain the experience that they need to, because every mistake that they're making, it's not intentional, but there's a lesson to come from that. And on the next job, a similar detail won't have the same mistake, but it's going to take a long time and a lot of money to get there. It's tough at the scale that you're doing it, and with the amount of experience that everyone who's working for you has.
Well, I mean, it goes back to what Ed said too. It's like it's a prototype, and that's exactly, every job we do is different, but we're also going into more and more detailed jobs every single time. So it's like, yeah, we're going to make, a handful of mistakes on this job. We're going to fix them. It's going to come out great. And then when we go to the next job, we're going to be prepared not to make those mistakes again. The problem is that next job is even more complex. And those mistakes that we can't make, we won't. But now we're going to run into a whole nother slew of them because we're dealing with more complex. And it's always been that way, and that's just been the nature of it. But you're right. I mean, chalk it up to experience and, it's totally self-inflicted.
And it's not anyone's fault, and it's not that anyone's doing it intentionally, and that's kind of the nature of the beast with the jobs that you're doing. I just think that those are the type of jobs where somebody would land, 1-2 of them a year and be like, these are the subs that are going on this job, and this is the guy that's going on this job, because I know that this basically mandates or necessitates that level of detail. And I think that every one of your jobs are like that. So, I mean, who are you throwing at each job? It's, right. If you have your best guy on one job, you can't spread them all over the place. So it's tough. Yeah. Cause like every job that you're landing is that one, that the two that people want a year, where they're putting their good guy or their good team on, and you don't have a B string, a C string, like Ed was saying earlier, that you need to have all top tier people for every single job. There's no break.
Well, I won't take it personally. So.
That's true.
Oh yeah, say it to yourself tonight.
I'm going
before
to.
You go to bed.
I just downloaded the I don't even remember what it's called. The four.
I really wish that book was referred to me from someone else.
You know what?
You just can't take that personally, John.
Yeah, you're taking it way too personally.
Exactly.
Do your best work, John. Read it.
I know.
We didn't even talk about the third agreement, which is don't make assumptions. That's the whole. We could go into that for.
I assume.
Think about how many assumptions. Yeah.
Well played,
especially change orders. If you think about how many assumptions, like contractors making assumptions when it comes to change orders, like usually by not, documenting it or assuming people knew what they meant when they said, hey, let's go with that nicer one. And you're like, well, you knew it was costing more money, right? Didn't you? No, I didn't know that. Oh, I assumed you did. So yeah, that's a whole nother, subject.
What's the fourth agreement? Did we say that?
The fourth one is always do your best. So for those listening, keeping score. So first is be impeccable with your word. Second is don't take anything personal. Third, don't make any assumptions. And fourth, always do your best. Those are the 4 agreements.
How do we skip 3?
John made some reference and he jumped to it.
Yeah. We got sidetracked. This whole thing has been kind of like we go down rabbit holes. I see that. I listened to a few of your other shows,
and people love it.
Yeah, we had Ross Fathui on just a couple episodes ago, and I chatted with him today, and he's like, "What do you think of the podcast?" I'm like, "It was great." A ton of people reached out. He's like, "I listened to it. We went down all different topics." I'm like, "That's the best part of this is that it's genuinely a conversation that we get to just chat." And let it go where it goes, and there's no structure. And here we are, almost 3 hours in. Ed, you've been on 6 coaching calls today, and now a 3-hour podcast, and you're still smiling ear to ear. So,
yeah, right, yeah, that's great. I think you guys should change the title, call it like the Modern Craftsman Rabbit Hole Podcast.
We'll work on that.
We it's a fact that we have people do the Survey Monkey, and I think there's only been 8 people that have gone onto it, but we asked about like, hey, duration. We asked about like, should we stay more structured? Should we stay, organic? Everyone else has answered all the different questions differently. 3 here, 4 there, whatever. 100%, everyone's like, keep it organic the way it is.
Yeah.
So it's kind of fun because we get reviews, but this is kind of a way for us to dial in on certain areas. So it's a fact.
Yeah, no, and I love the dialogue between it. I think it's great to have the 3 of you, and I'll be able to, you guys kind of all get in each other's business, and all that.
Yeah,
it's great. It's been very good.
And we hang up and question each other's friendships and
motives, everything.
Yeah. No, Ed, this was awesome. I really appreciate you hopping on and making time this week. I know you just got back from vacation, so it's awesome that you were able to make it work.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, Nick. I really enjoyed it, and yeah, let's do it again soon. We didn't really hardly cover. I was going to talk about some of the stuff with COVID and what we're seeing with our clients and all that kind of stuff. So let's do it again sometime. We'll hook up and
round
see what
2.
Things are.
I'll send you the
Round
link.
2.
We'll schedule it, and I will send you a reminder this time.
Okay, that's good. Awesome. Yeah, but more than a day before, Nick.
Yes,
right.
yes.
Yes.
Ed, thank you so much, man.
Thanks, Ed.
You're
Thank
very
you, sir.
welcome. Thanks, guys.
Have a
Take
good
care.
All
one.
right. Take care. All right. Bye-bye.
That's a wrap to our first fully sponsored podcast, a new sponsor, Duration Moulding and Millwork. So from their standard line of molding profiles to beveled sidings to semi-custom and custom molding profiles, historically accurate millwork, you name it, Duration provides unparalleled performance where fit, finish, and durability matter. Stocked in 6 different architecturally correct profiles with heavy shadow lines, Duration beveled siding is one of the real game changers, not only because it's indistinguishable from red cedar siding, which I don't know if Brent Hull will agree with, but that's all right, when it's finished, but also because of its 16-foot length. Finger joint free material results in fewer vertical joints, and unlike real wood composite, and fiber cement sidings, Duration beveled siding doesn't require back or edge priming of cuts, greatly reducing installation labor. No need for gapping, no clearance requirements for grade patios or even roofing material, further speed installation time, and all from environmentally friendly, highly recyclable content building materials. Duration bevel siding checks all the boxes. To learn more about it, Duration Poly Ash Products, please visit their website, durationmillwork.com. DurationMillwork.com.
You guys use them, right? Or you guys were having issues getting the siding?
They Boral stopped making the beveled, so Duration picked it up, and now they manufacture it. Mm-hmm. But they manufacture a ton of stuff.
Yeah,
and
they're actually super close to me.
They got a great Instagram. They're always pulling in like a historical molding and showing it rotted to pieces, and then basically blasting out 1,000 of them out of this stuff. So
yeah,
it's cool.
Yeah, actually, I'm just getting something delivered from the lumber yard that basically is affiliated with them, right around the corner from me.
Nice. You guys know where to find us. We will see you guys. Oh wait, who do we got up next week? We haven't been doing that.
Let's see.
Next week,
Gary Kelly.
Gary Kelly.
Oh, he's from
Kelly Construction.
Two first names.
Cross the pond.
He wants to talk about work life, time management, and money management.
Oh boy.
Ooh.
And dealing with chaos. LOL. So, UK Construction. I'm actually really excited about that because there's a lot of YouTube, we'll call them commenters, that talk about how we're idiots in the U.S. by building with wood, and we should be building everything out of concrete. I don't know what part of... I could be totally wrong. It might not even be the UK. But
like trim and stuff?
We can talk about it. Yeah, I don't know. So we'll see you guys next week.
Hey, jump on iTunes. We still need those things.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Okay.
iTunes, and then jump on SurveyMonkey, which is linked in a profile. Give us a little bit more feedback. It doesn't have to be positive, can be negative. It's
profile on Instagram, the Period Modern Craftsman.
Correct, yeah. You guys shaped this podcast, so give us some feedback.
Feedback's appreciated. Spreading the word is appreciated.
Monocrossman Mondays.
Yeah, anything helps.
Yeah, feedback, not audio feedback, just feedback on.
Which we had a little tonight, but I think we sorted it out.
Yeah, so don't leave us any comments on that. Thanks.
Thanks for listening, guys.